So today I am with Mandarin from Ghent. Pleasure to be with you, sir. Mandarin is been playing Star Wars CCG for a while. I don't know exactly how long, but his games are very entertaining to watch, and we're so lucky to glad to have him here today. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Yeah, I've been playing since I was in middle school, since the game came out in the mid 90s. And I came back to GEMP during COVID. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've been liking the kind of critical discussions you've been initiating about the metagame, and I hope you keep it up.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, well then let's get started here. I'll share my screen. I'll try to anyway, and we'll kind of get to the main content here. And there we go. All right. Um, so there's multiple ways to play Hunt Down. Classic objective been around for a while. Dark side generally wants to flip by having Vader battleground sight is how it's usually played. Often people just use the Hunt Down objective, but they do not use this optional ability to use Epic Duel. So in 2021, Justin Desai or All Stars 97 played this deck and kind of the top eight for retro. There are another way to play it, like so. Dark Deal does have a deck similar, so I've kind of modified a little bit for PDS2. But where you have Epic Duel, but you don't actually use Epic Duel, he kind of goes to space, adds some characters. But today we are talking about Mandarin's deck, the OG Mandarin, and his Hunt Down Dueling deck, which actually does duel, and we're excited to talk about that today. Okay. All right. So this is the Hunt Down Dueling deck. This is the correct one. And no, whenever you're playing someone, you don't know exactly their deck, but you have the standard two Vader's Obsessions, two Circles Now complete. That way you can get rid of Luke or get rid of Obi-Wan, duel them, and that way you have an extra copy if need be.
Yes.
Four Vaders, usually pretty standard, two focused attack. What was interesting about your deck, of course, is you have three Imperial Propagandas. And I thought,
Yep.
you don't run into a lot of people running three of these. Can you help us understand kind of your deck choice with this a little bit?
No, yeah, I appreciate that. That is a thing about this deck that's a little unique. And I mean, that's in there because your toughest mismatches are going to be EBO and HBX. That's what I found anyway when I first got back into GEMP a couple of years ago. Like I said, I grew up playing the game. I pretty much started doing dueling when Epic Duel just came out, before the Objective and Special Edition was even out. It just appealed to me. I think just my strengths as a player, the things I could keep track of in a game and the things that I couldn't. And, we can get into this throughout the discussion because it's definitely a broader point. But I think that dual hunt down is the best option for hunt down in the meta. Definitely in Reflections too, which is my favorite format for hunt down. But I think in DS2, it might even be better pound for pound than non dual hunt down. But I want to make a caveat there, which is that in a tournament, I think that non-dual hunt down is actually stronger, more reliable, and that's because you're going to have to face a lot of HBX and EBO. You don't see that much HBX and EBO in top three. I don't know if you could speak to that better, Bill,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like a ring of fire around the top eight or even the bottom levels of top eight. You see some really strong, let me just kill this here.
Sure.
You see some really strong space decks. So those were tough for me when I first got back into the game. You kind of have to play a perfect game, and I'm getting back to the props here, the propagandas, but you kind of have to play a perfect game against HBX, and that means get all the effects out, and we'll get into that with the specific effects, and you have to find their hidden base. Which means you have to, maybe watch the systems that are dropping and make very smart use of your three ships here. So, the props that are there against EBO, especially, obviously you can hit Kessel. with HBX or any deck that maybe tries to run a battle order scenario. But, with the +2 drain at all of the space locations for EBO, that really adds up quick. And Hunt Down does have the disadvantage of being a fragile, somewhat fragile deck design, which means if you lose certain key cards, you're done. And starting with Visage, of course, that hits your opponent too. First turn, it hits your opponent too. But if you keep cool mentally against Hunt Down, you should notice that their deck is getting messed up too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I could lose a barrier, I could lose a Forlom, I could lose Evazan. A lot of cards don't really matter too much, but you could lose a Vader's Obsession, and if they have a run Luke run, that means you can't do a Luke. That means you just lost a win condition. If you lose security precautions or secret plans, I definitely agree with you that secret plans should just pretty much be in every dark side deck, unless there's a real plan why you don't need that. Chimera, you big coward. You need this stuff to fight the big retrieval. Yeah, props really, really, really help. I actually feel that if I play the right match against any EBO deck, I can win with this deck. Granted, they could come in and tech something against this deck here. Of course, that is a ground rule for Star Wars CCG that you can always tech for someone, and that's okay. That might be sort of friendly competition for some people. It's not the way I like to look at the game or look at the meta as something that functions or has different pieces that make the game a puzzle to think about, right? But props basically will help you win the force loss race against a space deck with big drains, and of course psychologically it can just be devastating. I don't know what your experience has been, Bill, but if someone drains at Kessel or Coruscant and you hit them with one propaganda, very often they move away and they just say, I don't want to get this escalated to 4 force loss, or and then if you hit them with the 6, it's very hard to win at that point. And the other key thing here is that this is 6 destiny. The maybe simpler option would be to, if someone doesn't really like propaganda or they're afraid of just people packing in controls, to cancel that, which is something you can do. You could replace that with 2 other ships and a lateral damage. um, that is going to really weaken your options for dueling. And I'll kind of pause a little bit on that, but the thing with Hunt Down Dueling, really to make it work, is that you need to be able to duel when you need to duel. When someone steps to you, and that's the biggest mistake people make against Hunt Down Duel, is they kind of think, oh, so what? They don't have it, or they're not packing, and that's a win for me usually, for the most part. I would say just a raw blind duel is going to be 6-4 in Darkside's favor, and if I have a focused attack, then it's more like 7-3. But that's actually risky odds for more risk averse players, and I think that's a big reason we don't see Hunt Down Duel, is because they can top deck high destinies too. And I've got a lot of ones and a fair amount of twos in here also. So I'll pause a little bit on the destiny question because that gets into the matchups. But yeah, that's what props are here for. It's actually pretty tough to face EBO without propagandas, and it can't hurt versus HBX either. And if you're in a TRM deck, you're facing a M&T deck, whether that's probably TRM or Profit, you're going to need as many 6s as you can. And just to make another side note with strategy, because I think this is good for people who maybe want to get into Hunt Down Dueling, is you have to, unless you're a exceptional tracker, which I am not. I'm a decent tracker. I can track well enough. You have to sift out the 1s and the 2s, and you have to replace them with 6s and 5s.
Okay. And you're replacing this, with Janice, or what do you mean by replacing them? Like selectively
Good
losing? Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's with Janice. Yeah, two X2 Janices. It is not ideal, honestly, playing 2 Janices in this deck, but yeah, basically Janice. You use that 1 force, and if you can, every turn, You're putting your unused sixes. The nice thing about Circle is now complete is there's nothing to just raw cancel that. So you can throw your extra circle back in, you can throw your extra visage back in. Sometimes I'll hold on to my visage if things are going great, just in case they throw a spy down. But yeah, really using Janice to um, so the first thing you want to do, and this is the way that I start to manage my reserve deck, is when you activate, if it's first turn or second turn, it doesn't really matter. But when you get to like third or fourth turn, as everyone knows, with Hunt Down with the activation platform, especially if you get Emperor out, that's an extra force at the Holo Theater. You're activating a ton of force. I really only try to occupy docking bays with this deck, so I'm getting extra force, from mob points, and you can activate almost your whole deck usually by turn 4. So at that point, you might want to activate half your force, and then maybe doing a quick Emperor scan or scan with Crush the Rebellion or even Secret Plans, do a quick scan to see how your reserve deck looks. And then you can make the decision, do I want to do Janus now? Or do I want to maybe activate everything and do a Janus then? But you kind of always want to be watching your reserve deck to be pulling the extra EPP Vaders out or pulling your ships out. And that's again the secret to being able to win duels, which really forced the dark side player to ante up pretty significantly. That's a loss of 9 force if you lose Vader, and that's your key character that you've also lost. And I would really recommend for people who are maybe interested in this deck or just like the excitement of duel to try to not concede after you lose Vader, because it happens sometimes. And that's when you really see different levels of this deck and the win conditions that you need. You have 2 Mara, and I play only 1 in Reflections too, but for in order to occupy the conditions of Honor the Jedi, right? I've got to go a little heavier on beef, and there's no Shizor. So I use Tumara, and Tumara is great, because, with a numbers deck, they might want to park Luke at Home One Docking Bay. And again, you're going to have the force to move over to whatever docking bay they hide at, but that's card disadvantage. And, Mara's great. If you have Mara with her saber and a focused attack and they're not playing dual tech, and you even have like 1 turn to try to game your destiny a little bit, you can beat a big Luke, big boy Luke. So yeah, really you need the beef to spread as thin as you need to, because honor hurts this deck a lot. And um I don't know if you want to get into to the question of no escape just yet, but I think we were talking about just how to get your dual destinies. But yeah, using Janice to put your 6s and 5s back in, and you gotta get those 1s and 2s out of there, because yeah, obviously that's how you lose duels, and you lose Vader.
No, absolutely. No, yeah, I think we can talk about no escape. Yeah, and that's the difference between Premier Death Star 2 format and Premier Jabba's Palace Steel deck, which this no escape was introduced in Jabba Palace Steel deck, and Premier Reflections 2. Yeah, no escape obviously, makes it so, effects, epic events, objectives are immune to Honor the Jedi, whereas normal Honor the Jedi will, reduce, damage by 2 from any of these things, unless, Dark Side, occupies 3 battleground sites, which can be hard. And I do notice, you have exactly 1, 2, 3 battleground sites natively, in case the
Yes.
light side gives you nothing. So very obviously, but yeah, for sure. And I think, Andy, Talaga made a comment about, he thinks that PDS2 Bring Him Before Me is better. And then, Hunt Down, when it comes to Reflection 2, all of a sudden Hunt Down becomes good again because of no
Yes.
escape, you know.
No, that's a great point, and I agree with Andy about that. And when I first got back onto Gemp a few years ago, I played Brigham. I think I played Brigham and Nudge TRM my first time back. Right, good decks for someone to pick up. No, this has a lot of disadvantages compared to Brigham in DS2. One big disadvantage is you can get hit with Revolution. And Revolution TRM is pretty popular in DS2. And, if they revolve your Holo Theater, right? You lose whatever extra force that's like, 3, that's 3 icons right there.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do you have to have that extra spot for a Vader, and there's no Monarch of Vader split either. So that's like an extra card, not the worst card to play. But yeah, Brigham doesn't even have to worry about Revolution, because of course Emperor's Throne Room is immune to Revolution, and they have the nice benefit of just pulling Emperor from your deck at -2, and they can deal with Luke without having to worry about all these 6s and 7s that I have to play, because you just grab Luke. Yeah, you can play a space build easier with Brigham. But yeah, I completely agree, and I just am, we'll see what I play in the tournament, but this is just a more fun deck for me to use compared to Brigham. But yeah, I definitely agree with Andy. It's a much harder deck to use, and I think for that reason, though, it can also be kind of underrated and kind of slept on. Of course, it does have the potential for bigger force loss with Brigham. Brigham, you can definitely occupy a lot of sites. You can pound, search, and destroy. But with this, you can do search and destroy and visage. So, yes, while you do have to sort of deal with the uphill battle of playing this version of, I mean, obviously, it's kind of funny in a way to call Hunt down an uphill battle because it's such a cheesy deck. You know, um, it's I would say at minimum 6-4 Hunt Down's favor versus the best um uh M&T deck. And maybe when we talk about, I don't play resistance in this deck. Of course I play the props, but I don't really even worry about AFAs, believe it or not, and a lot of people play, the card that cancels AFA, of course. Um and I've lost against COTVG. Obviously we go back and forth, but
Yeah.
I think I got hit with 3 or maybe even 4 AFAs from him once, and I still won. And that's just because the force loss potential for this deck is just huge, and that's really what it has going over Brigham. And the win condition is, it's always really flashy when Brigham can just turn Luke, but
Yes.
that's not really
Absolutely.
what you're trying to do with Brigham, of course. And but yeah, you can like totally wipe them. Honestly, most people concede after you win a duel against them, and that's not even really needed. But yeah, just the force loss potential is huge with this deck. But yeah, I agree with Andy, and I think that's a point worth making. I could say something about the docking bays if you want.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit
So
curious about your choices there. Yeah.
nice. Yeah. So obviously, Executor and Coruscant docking bays, those are no brainers, just your 1Os. Um, Cloud City docking bay and DS1 docking bay, pretty much also no brainers because you are immune to Lost in the Wilderness. And yeah, having Vader hit with Lost in the Wilderness really sucks in this game. It might flip you back. They're going to start to like really take liberties with their Luke and their Obi. And yeah, if you're at these internal or non-planetary sites, you are immune to that. So those are kind of obvious picks. Um, yeah, the Tatooine docking bay, not crazy about that, but it's kind of a necessary evil in this format because you have to use an extra site in order to satisfy honor. Dark Deal does something cool, which in his he has non-dual and dual hunt down. He uses I know he uses Abyss in his duel. I don't know if he uses it in his non-dual, and he only
Yeah,
uses
yeah, let me grab it. Yeah, he
yeah, his Abyss
uses
deck, if you have that, is interesting.
yeah. I have the P actually
Cool.
I have the Reflections 2 version 2. I can grab that as well. Let me grab that. It's similar to PS2 deck, but that's fine.
Right. Yeah. So, he plays one Emperor, one Janus, one of all the Vaders. I mean, I like that deck. I've played that deck or, whatever minor modifications I would make to that deck. And it's really interesting. It's hard to play. That will make you a really good hunt down duel player if you play this because you don't have you might not draw Janus. But it's interesting. You have a better chance winning a duel against Big Luke, Jedi Luke, who's obviously really popular, really dominant in DS2.
Yeah,
So, but the good thing about him playing Abyss is, I think he might have lateral damage. Um, but
he
yeah,
does.
he
Yeah,
does.
he
But
does. Yeah,
you get a little bit more space with your only one Emperor, only one Janus, obviously only one Mara. You do have to do this the Vader Saber. He only plays one Vader Saber. That is,
right.
that's cool. That's gutsy.
Yeah.
But then you have to really rely on your high destinies at that point because you don't have your saber to help you. I'm sure he probably only uses one weapon levitation in here, if at all. Um, See, I don't like not having my sabers, so I'm always tempted to just go to weapon
Well,
lev.
yeah. I mean, this is this is the fake dual deck, right? This is he has
This
epic
is
dual. This
well, there you go.
yeah, this is the
Right,
fake dual
right,
deck.
there you go.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But he also has he's a big fan of Abyss. He also plays that in his duel. And I think he uses the saber you can throw as well as this one in that deck. And I probably only uses one weapon lev, but that's what I'm saying about a deck that might make you a better dueler is you have to be able to think about, can I still win this? There you go.
Yeah.
Without your duel bonus. Yeah, but the benefit of this is it frees up your slots a little bit and you can go harder against space.
Yeah, I agree. No, it definitely gives you more flexibility. Because if I guess we go back to your deck.
And so
Yeah.
the other option, though, if you don't want to use Tatooine Docking Bay, is just go Presence of the Force, and you can put that down, and that's something that Dark Deal, I know he does that in his and definitely in his dual hunt down. You can put Presence of the Force on Coruscant Docking Bay. You are starting Crush the Rebellion, so you are safe from Clash of Sabers in case they try to cancel that, and then you satisfy the third battleground site. So my reason for not doing that, in a healthy meta where people are not, and by that I just mean you're not trying to counterpick your opponent's deck, or just like I just find that space is very very heavily represented in the Gemp tournaments. And that's that is no shade, but against a HBX, that's what I was saying about a perfect game against HBX. I want to get everything going quickly, and I don't want to have to burn a advisor to grab Presence of the Force. I want to try to minimize my bad draws as much as possible, and that's really the big problem with for Huntdown not having no escape. Like I said, still a slept on deck, but without no escape, you need your good draws. Like you need to get, especially against HBX, you're going to need security precautions. First of all, if you don't get your security precautions, you've probably lost. You probably need secret plans in order to stop them when you get them low with HBX. Let's say you blow up their hidden base, you find their hidden base, then they can do what is it, all wings report in, and
Correct.
get back like 8 force. But the good thing is if you have them low enough and you have secret plans out, they can't get that back. So you need, it's in a way it's a gift and a curse not having no escape in DS2, because that's one less effect for you to fish for. But yeah, just to try to streamline and keep myself safe. Same for playing the extra visage. You don't really need an extra visage, but I like to keep my pedal on the gas when I'm against an aggressive space deck, high output damage space deck. And they can throw, obviously, Koran Horn's not in this format. And by the way, I think JPSD is probably the strongest format for hunt down duel. I think I got third in the JPSD tournament
Nice.
last year. And yeah, it just, they don't have Kuran Horn. You have no escape. Yeah, it's a pretty abusive format for Hunt Down. But yeah, you don't really need two Visage. That's something that player choice could come into play for. But yeah, I want that damage output against these really aggressive space decks like EBO and HBX. And Yeah, I mean, just while we're on the topic of a spy at Holotheater, um, that's another thing you got to be careful with facing Hunt Down. In a tournament match, I don't remember who it was. It was a pretty strong space player threw down a spy at, I think actually this might have been Kuran Horn, but they threw down Kuran Horn at Holotheater first turn, and then I came down second turn with blast door controls and EPP Vader, and I lost my EPP Vader, but he had to lose like 8 force. And I think EBO, that might be it. You might lose your key cards. But yeah, just real quick to wrap up the docking bays. Obviously the two mobile site ones are obvious picks, but yeah, for the Tatooine docking bay, you could definitely use the Endor docking bay. That's a great docking bay to use because of the extra force that it costs for them to use it. I kind of like this just because the way I think about dual hunt down is I want as much mobility for myself, and I don't care too much how much mobility they have. And that's something a little bit different. Like Brigham, you can just have your superior activation platform. You can play your control game. You've got, a boatload of sack. You've got your emperor in order to use it, and you can just choke them out and control them. Very oppressive. And even when you start losing your force with Vader, I like what Andy Talaga said in one of his old videos. He's like, if there was a light side card where it's like lose 5 force, Luke is removed from the game, people would use that card. And that
Right.
kind of speaks to how nice and simple Brigham is. And, but Hunt Down Duel is like that too. You just have to be ready to manage your hand, manage your card advantage, keep your duels where they need to be when you need them. Keep your deck on point in terms of your destiny draws. But yeah, I don't worry too much about needing to get them on Endor. I mean, you don't see uh, um, there is good in him that much in this format, but if you do, they already give you the docking bay. And yeah, I mean, what I don't know if have you seen any Endor based DS2 decks?
I mean, the Andor docking bay, the bring them before me is somewhat forced to use it just because of this rule they made that you can't have a Death Star 2 docking, Death Star 2 site or location
Yep,
and a Death Star site. I really don't like the rule, but that is what a Decipher rule does, and because of
yep,
that, Bring 'em Before Me cannot use Death Star docking bay, which they would like
yeah,
to. So
good point.
most Bring 'em Before Me decks can only use Cloud City docking bay, and many of them just use Endor because it's very convenient, right? Because Lord Vader deploys at a discount there, and it is like you said, it is harder to move there for the light side. Like when you do the flip version here, you can say it requires 7 force plus 9 force. For you, it's free if you have an Imperial, which almost
Awesome,
everything you have Imperial. And I
awesome.
will say though that there is an
Yeah,
advantage just because you mentioned revolution. Well,
yeah, yeah.
oftentimes many games they will revolution the indoor docking bay and they'll do the opposite to you. They will
Good
make the
point.
dark side suffer this and then you suffer, then you can't get away, and that's
Good
also a
point.
problem. You know,
Good point. Yeah, and you already have to worry about revolution enough with this deck. Yeah, I mean, just I guess again, last thing about Tatooine Docking Bay is just that, sometimes you do see these kind of weird Tatooine based decks. You still see a Tashi Station Obi's Hut deck. That's you don't want to sleep on that. You might see a Harvest deck even, and Harvest is something dark. Not dark side, but just Hunt Down needs to respect because you Hunt Down, you want to force them into this bottleneck where they just can't make their deck work anymore. And again, that's something that's very cheesy about Hunt Down is that they could really have a great understanding of the meta. Um, they could have a really cool deck, but if you just hit them hard enough to bring them low enough at a certain point mid game, they can never get out. But yeah, obviously Harvest, they can claw their way out. But not even just Harvest, but you might see a weird Tatooine based deck using some of their obviously like whatever the Cantina or like Mos Eisley and all that stuff. And I just want to be able to get to Tatooine if I need. You see like a Gravel Storm deck or whatever sometimes, and I just want to be able to get where I need to get to make that duel happen. And again, that's a great thing about Hunt Down versus Obi that Brigham doesn't have. That you just need to touch him. You just need to like touch down at his site, initiate that duel. Um, and maybe I'll just throw this in here if it's okay,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
I think this is a key strategy point for dual Hunt Down. Um, Okay, so if you scan your reserve deck and you've got, you know, a 1, a 2, a 1, a 3, or something like that, you don't wanna go into duel, um, you don't wanna duel a character with a lightsaber. You definitely don't want to duel Big Luke, period. You don't want to duel Ben Kenobi with a saber either. It's just as you're going to lose, you're going to like lose Vader and lose big time. So, what you do in a situation like that is you want to, one, do a Janus. You want to, if you have an advisor, it's pretty easy to have an advisor. I think I play 2 in this, I play 3 in Reflections 2. But you want to maybe do an advisor, maybe do a masterful move, and put those into your reserve deck. And you probably got 3 or 4 cards. I'm sorry, put those in your use pile. You've probably got 3 or 4 cards in your reserve deck. You recirculate, okay, and then at the start of their turn, you do your Emperor to reshuffle your deck. That's one of my favorite things to do. So then you've just mixed in like maybe a 6, a 5, or who knows, maybe a 7 or something. The only problem with that is if they play disarmed, and that's a real thing. You don't, like I said, you have, I think it's like a 6-4, maybe 7-3. I think I would go with 7-3 personally against an M&T deck. If they play disarmed, you don't want to. Right, when I played Rabbit in the finals, and shout out to Rabbit, in the finals for CNV, I had to go, I think, like a Hail Mary Vader. It wasn't super Hail Mary, but it was like mid game. I moved over to him, and I'm like, I'm just gonna disarm him before I duel, and then he disarmed me,
Yeah.
and I still dueled him because I was like, well, now I'm backed into a corner. I have to duel, or I'm gonna get beat down. And I drew some of those mediocre destinies. I don't think I even drew one of the ones that I put back in with Janice. And I think he drew a 5, and then fortunately he drew a 0 because he was playing TRM, and that really needs to be appreciated about TRM. As overbearing a deck it may be,
Yes.
they are floating a lot of zeros,
True.
and teacher said something. He was like, I like playing a lot of sites. I don't know what format he meant, but he's like, I like to play a lot of sites because I don't mind drawing zeros. I'd rather have the force to do stuff. And that is a good enough point, right? A good strategy point for just this game in general. Like, don't worry too much about your destinies just because you can't control them, and you do want to control the board. That's what you can control. However, with TRM against or a deck floating zeros against Hunt Down Dueling, they probably will draw. Well, they have a good chance of drawing a 0. That's a big disadvantage. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of my thought about when to use duels. And what's nice about it, you can do it in your move phase. I really like to, and this is great if they have Run Luke Run, to do Vader's Obsession and then just draw up a bunch of cards. And you again, you're scanning your reserve deck, so if Vader's Obsession is in your reserve deck. Often you do have to pay a few force to get yourself into position. You might have to drop Tarkin or something. Tarkin's one of those cards sometimes you just got to pay for him to try to get the positioning. And I'll get to positioning in a second, but yeah, you can draw up and draw Vader's Obsession then. And that does get into positioning because a really good player, like when Detarg or something like that, they're weaving their Luke in and out of non-battlegrounds. So you can't easily just, like, let's say you pick up Vader. Actually, against Detarg, I had picked up my Vader, and then he did a out of commission, and I had like 15 cards in my lost pile, and he knocked my Vader out, so I couldn't redeploy Vader. So I had to come down with Mara, and it wasn't good for me at that point. But my point to say is that a good player will not get too bold against Huntdown. But if you're bold and you're just throwing Luke at a battleground, I can, even if it's big Luke with a saber, even if you have dual tech, you do have to be careful because I can, if I have the time to get all these cards together, I can do blast door controls and come down with Vader and Tarkin, maybe even first strike, which first strike's amazing in this deck. It can really win you games. And sometimes it's like I'm very tempted to pitch first strike sometimes, when I am maybe not drawing Vader right away. And I'm like, "Ugh, I don't like how this is going. I should just focus on getting Vader out, period, and having the option to duel, period." But yeah, first strike, you can really get some good stuff back late game. But anyway, first strike, it's sort of like the legendary, torch light side of DTF Beggar. Obviously, you don't have Beggar, but if you can battle into a duel, that can be great. I don't get to do that much just because when I'm playing against good players, they don't often give me that chance. But yeah, you can Tarkin in a battle, obviously cancel a dual destiny of your
Yes,
choice. And if they
absolutely.
didn't save force, right, you can first strike. They can't run Luke run. They can't swing and a miss. Swing and the miss is great against this deck because it can cancel focused attack. Yeah, obviously courage is pretty solid too, and I think people have to think about playing courage maybe in TRM. But again, it's a slept on deck, and you're going to see the dual tech and reflections too for sure. But in DS2, you might be able to skate by without that. But anyway, that's sort of some thoughts about positioning and the docking bays and other options. Yeah, I guess I have some more thoughts about the red, but what do you want to maybe look at next?
No, I think these are all excellent points, and now you touched on a lot of things which can be harmful. I mean, Courage of Skywalker, and yes, swing and a miss. I know Dark Deal in his Prophet decks he runs swing and a miss. I don't know
Yep.
about Courage of Skywalker. I would say, probably that if you have the time to stack your destinies, right? If you can use your Janus appropriately,
Yeah, yes,
yeah, I
yes.
mean, I mean, you should be able to focused attack, and even if they, do a courage
Yep.
unexpectedly to you, it's very rare for them to have both of these cards in the same deck, right? So,
Yes.
you know, and you're right about Jai Luke, because the subtract 3 from any attempt to cross him over. Unfortunately, that applies to Epic Duel, even if they don't even consider crossing him over. They just want to lose him. So it is definitely harder to beat up Jai Luke. It's definitely possible. Um, Maybe you could
Yeah.
talk a little bit about kind of stuff because like you talk about you have Janus. I was
Yeah.
curious like why not have like reactor
Good point.
terminal, like for
I
instance, like
love
why
that
Janus?
question.
Yeah.
I hate Reactor Terminal.
Okay.
I used to play it or I don't like it in this deck. I just find that it is too slow and it's kind of overkill. For two reasons. Like one, I am not going to have a giant hand necessarily in this deck. If I have a giant hand, I'm already one that just is a little risky, just because they could hit me. If you can a well-timed Grimtosh against this deck can really hurt. You lose two barriers. You could lose like both if you lose like both your circles or something. That's really bad. So yeah, for one, I just try to avoid drawing up too big ever. And to me, that is a bit of a disrespectful move when hunt down players draw up big time. And it's legit because Dark Side just is a mad disrespectful, deck archetype. And it's like it is what it is. Dark Side deck drawing up a big hand. And it's not as bad as Obs in Reflections too, with the big disrespect drop. But
Yeah.
it's to me that's a little disrespectful because I'm just basically banking on them not having Grimtosh, and I like to have more control over a match than that. But that's cheese. Cheese means you um kind of like can take a risk and get a giant win, a giant reward. So that's one thing is that I feel like Reactor Terminal is a little bit of an overkill that I don't necessarily ever even want to put more than one card back in a turn.
Okay.
It's nice that you don't have to pay to put stuff back. I mean, all things being equal, if I like just had a Reactor terminal out and I'm just regulating, that's awesome. But it's not that easy. And like you're gonna probably want a Janus. Janus is an ability 4 character. He's a nice backup for Emperor. You get the drain bonus. I definitely like kind of late game. You can throw him down with like Dengar, and that's pretty solid. In a pinch, I can even throw him down against someone who's invaded executor or something, with like a first strike. That's pretty strong. But yeah, I like the flexibility of Janice being a character who can help hold a site. And you need to hold sites in DS2, especially to satisfy honor. But yeah, against HBX, if you have or probably even EBO, you gotta watch it a little bit more with EBO because they can come with some beef. I think like Johnny Chu's HBX uses like maybe EPP Obi and EPP Luke. But yeah, I see a little bit more beef maybe in EBO. Anyway, if you've got a barrier and you can hold a site with Janice. And yeah, again, reactor terminal is just a little slow for me. Reactor terminal is great if someone is trying to figure out how to play hunt down, but if you really feel comfortable with it and you can take tighter corners, so to speak, you I don't think actually need it. And that I know is something that might be a sticking point from a lot of hunt down players. But yeah, I get it. I know I see what they want to do. They want to throw a six, and a five. But like I said, you can kind of already do one. That's a limited situation where you just want to throw multiple destinies into your reserve deck and then duel. That's not, that's not the most common thing that'll happen. There are a lot of duel situations where that does nothing for you. Like they just step to you at the audience chamber, or sometimes if I throw down Vader um with no extra force for barrier, that's a little, I don't like to do that. That's a big risk for them. They could lose a lot of force, but this is what I said about people will test you with hunt down duel. And fake duel helps with this too, of course, but they will just come after a lone Vader, and if I have a duel, that just really tips things in my favor potentially. But anyway, that's kind of the way I try to look at hunt down duel, and this is also why I go EPP Vaders. I hate having the no immunity. I hate having the no drain bonus, but I just need to be able to duel as frequently as I can. I need to be able to have as many times to duel as I can, and I don't really need the immunity most of the time, because if Vader is even at the same site as Obi and I'm playing my game right and I haven't had terrible draws, I'm about to really, maybe I'm not going to say win, but about to claim a huge advantage if they're even near Vader. So I actually don't think you really need it. And again, I want to keep the deck skinny. I want to have as little ones as possible. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts with Reactor Terminal. Obviously, if someone's maybe a really good tracker and they want to throw 4 cards into their reserve deck and they can track that many cards, sure, I'm sure you could do interesting things with that. But for me, it's too much to even track. So it's kind of diminishing returns. I find it a little bit slow. I mean, the Destiny isn't amazing either. And it's similar to like, again, Dark Deal only plays one EPP Han in most of his profit decks, because the way sees it, if you are packing an extra Han, that's not going to help you get to your win condition. It's not going to help you free Han if you have an extra Han in your hand. And yeah, that's kind of how I think about Reactor Terminal. I definitely see how it could work in some maybe more technical decks that maybe played the immunity Vaders and some sabers, and they kind of want a more well-rounded, more comprehensive game, where they can, they know where those destinies are, and so they can duel in 2 or 3 turns, after you step to them. And that's, again, yeah, it doesn't really fit my play style. I find it a little bit slow. And Janice is great. I did actually, when I did my version of Abyss Hunt Down, I did use, I think, one Janice and one Reactor Terminal, and I'll just say it was okay. And this is like kind of my approach to this game in general, is that like, I would love to just play some matches with someone who has a different view as me. Like if someone's like, hey, my hunt down uses Reactor Terminal and it's amazing, I would be like, great, let's play. Let's do several games. Yeah, I would love to play a hunt down that uses that, but not my favorite card.
Understood. And no, Star Wars CCG is a complex game, and it's hard to test. The games can last for very long. Decisions made early
Yes.
on can affect the rest of the game. So I agree with you. It'd be great to have some data here. It's hard to get, and we're often have to kind of use and the tactics that kind of yeah,
No, definitely. No, I mean, for me, the data has been that it just is too slow, and I want so what would you just theoretically, right? What would you consider if this was your deck fitting your play style? What would you maybe take out for reactor terminal?
I mean, to me, that's the hard. I mean, the only. To me, I think you're dead on about having Janus. I mean, if you look at Bragnasklee Superstar, I mean, what does he
Oh
have?
God,
I mean, he has two Januses. I don't recall him having a reactor terminal in that deck either. Could be wrong.
yeah,
So
yeah,
no, I mean, Janus is powerful. You're right. He synergized the Emperor. The only thing I worry about is like you said, you have like two circles or two Vader's obsessions or two key cards, and you drew them
yep,
together, and maybe it's hard to get, but I mean, the truth is like Janus is a pretty close to instant speed,
yeah,
changeover here. That's the
yeah.
that's the nice thing.
And
So
it's just, I mean, yeah, you have to drop him. If you don't drop him with Emperor, he does cost some force. But yeah, you can drop him and put a card immediately anyway. Like, and even if you drop Reactor Terminal and they really want to hit you, they can hit you after you drop it. But with this is again the thing that I think people who are intimidated or Huntdown is just an intimidating deck. Period. If you don't pack the tech for it, it's pretty oppressive. But I'm losing force too, and the good thing about that is I can use that to lose one of my duels if I have. But here's the other thing: is that if I lose a circle, I am probably telegraphing to my opponent
you have two
that I've got
circles. You
circle.
have a circle in your hand. Yes, correct. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I don't know a great way around that thing.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe the question would be for kind of people trying to approach this. You talked about intimidating. I agree with you because choosing which card to get rid of. You said earlier, sometimes you're tempted to get rid of a first strike.
Yep.
Like I guess I'd be curious, like how many of your kind of your duels and Vader deploys are
Yep.
intentional versus how often do you go blind? Kind of go into a duel. That would kind of be helpful to understand.
So I try to avoid blind duels as much as possible. Just because while it is slightly in my favor to the extent that I have really high destinies and I've, shown a concern for having the right destinies in this deck. Right, like I don't believe in playing sense in Hunt Down. I know it's pretty nasty to flip and then sense someone, yeah, where you're kind of having your cake and eating it too. But
Yeah.
like if I'm flipped Hunt Down, I'm doing great. And maybe I don't really even need to sense anything, but I don't like the destiny of sense. I'm blanking. What's the card, the interrupt that cancels AFA?
It is projective telepathy. This one right here.
Right, it's a
Yes.
fantastic card and would be great if I could put it in this deck, but I don't, I really can't have too many. After we talk about the blind duels, let's chat about You Are Beaten because that's kind of my 60th card.
Yeah.
But yeah, I avoid blind duels whenever possible because um I kind of feel like if someone steps to me, they drop down with EPP OB, or they drop down with like, against Profit. I don't know if Profit is just a fascinating deck that's, very fragile, very, very strong against the meta. I think actually I would maybe give it to Hunt Down, maybe like 5-5 to 4-5 or 6-4. Again, it's Dark Side. It's so cheesy, but um, they can come at you with a free Master Luke and maybe Lando on top of that, right? Or like Leia and initiate battle. Vader swings at someone. They free Han with uh uh what's that card? Someone who loves you. And then that's like 3 destinies against Vader. They might hit Vader. You could lose 12, 14 force if you don't play it tight against Prophet. But again, that's a blind duel. And the light side player might not know this, but they're taking a risk when they step to you. But they again, they might not really. They might say, "Hey, you have Epic Duel out. Is this fake duel? Let's really see." right? Or
Right.
you play dual cards. Do you just play X1? Some hunt down dual players just play X1 of each dual. I've known hunt down players who, maybe don't do focused attack, or they do only X1 focused attack. I love that because the destiny on focused attack is pretty bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't, they're kind of calling your bluff. And that is a really tough call. I think that is a advanced hunt down just skill about knowing when to blind duel. But I'll tell you this, if I have a barrier, I will barrier and see if I can at least get one turn to set up something, to at least get one more 6 or 7 in there, or 5 even. And and then, again, even just to look at my destinies, that's an interesting, another hunt down thing that sometimes you can psych yourself out, is you might activate all but 4 force, let's say, or 5 force, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna see how good my destinies are, and then I'll duel if they're good. And then you have all bad destinies, and you're like, damn, I still want to duel. And did it even really do any good to look at it? But honestly, main point of all that is that you might want to consider not dueling then, and I've definitely done that. I think in the game you saw me in the other day, where I was playing the Tatooine based deck. I think it was a Tashi Station Dark Deal
Elite.
deck.
Yep. Dark
Yeah,
Deal's
there
playing that.
was a
Yep.
turn
Yeah.
where I had to forego the duel. It might have been that I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, I've waited to duel. You got to be, but anyway, if you have all of your docking bays out of your deck, that's a green light to blind duel. If you have accounted for at least 2 Vaders, that's a green light to blind duel. But I try to avoid it. Times that I do blind duel are when I know that they're playing anti-duel tech. Let's say I've just got to scan their reserve deck because something wasn't in there. Then I'm like, oh, whoa, he's got courage. He's got a disarmed. He's got a run, Luke, run. He's got swing and a miss. And he's only got 3 cards in his hand. Then I might think, well, I might not get a better chance to duel than now. And that's an advanced hunt down dueling skill right there. Again, knowing how much worse it's going to get for you. So does that kind of get it? Again, like I guess another thing I look at with blind duels is like if I've got a barrier and a Tarkin in my hand, kind of easy, obviously they could have a barrier, so then that means I need to have a blast door controls. I don't want to like idealize the scenario too much to make it look like this deck is better than it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I have Tarkin and blast door controls in my hand and a barrier, then definitely wait. And then, you can really come down and pinch them with Tarkin.
No, absolutely. And I guess I was curious. Obviously, Tarkin's a Destiny 1. Obviously, he
Yeah.
has 4 deploy. Darth Vader
Yeah.
is, 6 deploy. You
Yeah.
basically need 11 force to deploy Vader and Tarkin at the same time. You don't have,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
No, and you don't have a battle order here. And I guess obviously because you're not
Yeah.
trying to, drain in space here. So very force intensive to really set this up and be able to execute.
Well,
Um,
no, I 100% agree. And, those are time I've pitched Tarkin at times like that, where sometimes against like Watch Your Step, even. Maybe let's wait to get into that. But I love Watch Your Step. I don't play Watch Your Step. I think it's annoying to play against Watch Your Step, but I think it's great that Huntdown has to answer to Watch Your Step. Why shouldn't it have to? It's such an abusive deck, and it's cool because they don't have Obi, so that's just off the table for you having a flipped objective. And it just means it's like you versus Jedi Luke at Cantina or something like that. It's pretty in your face, a pretty in your face matchup. But yeah, if stuff is really tight, let's say they have battle order, right? And I have to pay 3 to drain at the Cantina. That might be a time where I might pitch Tarkin, but it's a tough call because he's so good. When the 2 of them can hold a site, there's really nothing light side can do against. I mean, let's get to you are beaten in a second, but it's so strong. Because what are they going to do against Vader and Tarkin? They're going to come with like Han and Chewie. I mean, I mean, that is you don't want to underestimate Han and Chewie. That can really pinch someone for a lot of force. But and you don't have Dark Strike, a sniper in DS2, mind you. But yeah, that's a pretty fortified position with Tarkin and Vader. But anyway, to your point, yes, sometimes it's too much to come down with both of them. But to the point of blind duels, I've already got Vader out, and you want to get Vader out obviously as soon as you can, and that is the most important. That's a really important skill with Huntdown 2 is what do you do with your Vaders, right? I mean, I've seen people who will just drop a Mara or drop Emperor and not really rush to get Vader out, and they're like, whatever. There's this force loss going on, and I'll tell you against this is what I did against Johnny Chu. I got top 8 for CNV, and they didn't really break down 8th, 7th, 6th, and 5th place. But I was the only one in the bottom of top 8 who won a match against one of the top 4 players. That's maybe not the biggest boast in the world. I don't need it to be, but against Johnny Chu,
Yeah, I mean,
huge respect for
yeah,
that dude. And but yeah, I managed to beat his there is good in him. He beat me with his obs. That was an interesting match too. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? I think I had some bad draws in that deck. Basically, I went after his Shizor with my EPP Obi and missed Shizor, didn't draw 5. And then it was, I did make a mistake of dropping a Saber on my Luke to try to Path of Least Resistance in to beat down his Emperor, and he just, overloaded me. So, like, obviously, that's what you get. But yeah, anyway, my point about when to drop Vader first or not is that and I knew this from playing against SWC player, because when I was testing I've got a There Is Good in Him deck that I used in the last Reflections 2 tournament. I don't remember what I got in that. I don't know if I got top 8 or not. I think I was maybe 4-2, right? One of the many 4-2 players. That's not easy to get, but yeah, I lost 2 with my light side deck. I was doing our Most Desperate Hour build that Dark Deal shared with me, and yeah, it's a pretty hard deck to play, pretty complicated deck. But anyway, yes, I was the only one in top 8, bottom 4 of top 8, for what that's worth, to win a match against one of the people, and that's in one of the top 4. I could be wrong, right? I don't, obviously, no shade to anyone who got top 8. I think that
yeah,
goes without being said. But I knew from my matchups using my TIG, put Emperor out first turn. It totally crushes their activation. They're activating like maybe 2 force or something. And I'll tell you this: not everyone likes that, because you are going to be losing 2 force on top of your unflipped Visage of the Emperor. So you're going to be losing 3 force for a bit. But you've basically like stolen 2 turns from them. And in the Emperor, just the force you get from Emperor at a docking bay, it's like you're at mid game, like immediately, and they're still crawling out of the hole. But anyway, that's a rare position where I wouldn't put Vader first. But yeah, no, so and this is a great thing actually to also touch on. First thing I look for, of course, is EPP Vader in my hand of 8 cards. And this really gets to people who I think are trying to get into Huntdown. I've seen people play 6 Vaders or something, and obviously that's going to hurt your destinies. But yeah, it really does suck when you don't draw Vader with this deck. But here's how you work with that. So if you don't have Vader in your opening hand, if you're playing against Prophet, you've got your 6 force probably to put out Vader, and so be it. You don't have anything against Barrier. They may try to step to you with Luke. It's a little touchy having Vader out, but again, you maybe it's Vader backed up with like Mara and Evazan or something too. So that's like a lot. That's a lot you've got going on there. But yeah, you go for your first turn Vader to stop your force loss ASAP. That's the first thing. But if you don't get Vader, of course you grab your Wakilamoy with mob points before you activate, and then you activate. And when you use your arrest order, right, to pull your docking bay, first thing you look for is do I have 4 Vaders in my reserve deck? And you're hoping you don't, because if you've got Vaders in your force pile, at least you can draw up into them. But if you don't have either one of
Gi-
those, then you need to
Give me
start to
give me
think about,
1 second, Mandarin. 1 second
yeah,
here. All right, please continue.
great. So, what do you do for plan B if you don't have Vader in your opening hand? So that's where Holonet transmission is great, because, well, let's just say for a second that you've got Emperor in your hand, you've got 3 Vaders in reserve deck. So that means you have 1 Vader in your force pile. And if I don't have Holonet transmission, I'm probably not going to deploy anything my first turn. I'm not anything that costs force, right? If you get some of your effects in your opening hand, obviously that's great. Start to flood the board with your control-based effects. Obviously, blast door controls you want to hold on to. First strike, sometimes I'll drop, obviously no one likes to drop first strike before you need it, because then they can hit you with it first. But that's the question, is like, you have to be able to draw up. You don't really want to go to 14. If you have 13, you can probably at least get away with, they might not have Grimtosh. And so they hit you with Grimtosh immediately first turn. That's not the end of the world, but you want to draw up to get your Vader. If you can't drop Vader second turn, you're starting to get into shaky territory. That means you're really having to think smart. You may have to lose top deck if you don't get a second turn Vader. And then at that point, you just hope you don't lose a Vader's Obsession against someone who's playing Run Luke Run. If you're playing HBX and you don't have your, it's like you can't, because you need your security precautions, and you probably need secret plans and coward as well. But yeah, you could pitch a barrier. But anyway, point being, you can, if you've got Holonet transmission, and Holonet transmission is cool too, because you can cancel transmission terminated, which like isn't the most popular card in DS2, but people still use it. And you can cancel that, keep your Visage on the table. But if you have Emperor, maybe it's a long-wind way of saying something pretty simple, but you can drop Emperor, use the Lost version to pick up Vader from your used pile. And that's actually a pretty cool position, because you're getting huge force from Emperor. If he's at a docking bay, you're getting, what is it, 3 force from that or something ridiculous. You're getting a force from his icon. You're getting an extra force from Hollow Theater. And that means you're going to be at like maybe 9 force or something on your next turn. And that means you can come down with Vader and start drawing up to put your pieces together. Or you can even like put down Janice and Vader and then really start like putting your pieces together. So yeah, you want to really do first turn Vader anytime you can, unless you're playing against There Is Good in him. That won't have much impact on DS2. Yeah, no, I think point taken on that, right?
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. So yeah, so basically, you still want to mitigate the force loss. In your experience, it's probably not worth taking the hit turn after turn while you don't have Vader. So you generally still want to put Vader on. Um,
Yes.
and I'm guessing you're not using the flip side of this very much, or I guess it's the front side, whereas you can kind of use 4 force to return to locations, move phase
Hmm.
only.
Great, great point. I use that. That's actually a great ability. So that's really good against like sometimes against Nudge TRM. Again, if they're being really smart, they might be moving their Nudge around, moving Luke with Saber around. That's what D-Targ did against me that time, where he hit my Vader out of commission. That's a smart way to use Luke, is that he wasn't giving me many openings. But anyway, right, you can pick him up, and if they're over on Cloud City or something at like that 2-1 site, some training decks do that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, training decks will kind of hit you with AFAs early game. Maybe they'll throw spies at you. I'm not that worried about spies. I'm not that worried about Bausch. I do have one sniper, but this is about focusing on ping and occupying enough battlegrounds to satisfy honor. But yeah, people will definitely go to that Cloud City Walkway. That might be the card. And yeah, you'll have to like you're taking your hits. You know, that's the thing about Hunt Down. You're going to be taking your force loss to set up your semi-win condition duels. But I know I actually love that ability. You got to be careful, obviously. If you've got one Vader in hand, then you're susceptible to a Grimtosh or something. But it's actually a really useful ability to pick him up, and that's another thing I like about EPP Vader is that when you pick him up, you've got your saber with him. You've got the card economy, you know, and that was an interesting thing Decipher did in terms of managing card economy. I think to try to accelerate the pace of the game a little bit, and they did that with Star Trek CCG too with their EPPs. You know, they would have like Deanna Troy and Loxana Troy dual split card, and you know that's one of the best cards in that game, in my opinion. But yeah, you know, you've got Vader and his saber built in one, so you can pick him up, and you don't have to have it go to your use pile. I mean, a nice stylish move is to sort of do the throw the saber and catch it behind your back when you have a weapon lev, where you pick up Vader, you know, saber goes into the use pile, you do weapon love, and then you pick them both up. But you know, that's time, that's cards that you may not have in DS2, especially. It's all about trying to just manage your draws, you know, like you don't want to get bad draws in DS2. So I just try to, you know, sort of pin it back and keep it simple. But yeah, no, that's a really good ability. And that I guess gets into another interesting strategy point, which is counting, not even tracking destiny. That may be a thing too, but just you got to know how much force you need to activate. And like if I'm not thinking clearly, that can be really hard. You know, obviously in a tournament you don't really want to ask for a revert. That's bad form. I mean, it's like a a gentleman move for someone to grant a revert in tournament. And you know, I'll do it personally. You know, if I don't feel like I've revealed my game plan too much, or if it's not going to get too confusing for me, I'll let someone revert. But for the most part, you don't want to revert in a tournament. So that means you got to count your force right, and you need to think, okay, do I want to battle? Do I want to duel? And you need to like know that before you start getting cards out of your hand. So it's kind of a lot in terms of a working memory task, you know, a short-term memory task to be able to strategize all that during your activate phase. But that's the thing. Yeah, right. The move phase ability, you got to know, okay, I'm just going to save that 4 force. Probably won't battle this turn, but I'm going to use that. I'm going to pick Vader up. I'm going to hit my lose a visage ping at the end of the turn. And again, like sometimes eliminating someone's visage is not always worth it. You know, if you've got a retrieval engine going, it could hurt them too if they've got bad draws. But you know, I'm going to hit my visage drain. That I probably means I'm getting hit with a force drain if I need to get Vader somewhere that he's not. And then you come down with him and you duel, and it's like very, very, very doable. You know, that's a good time. That's probably a perfect time to also use Monarch. Let's say they're using EBO. By that time, I've probably got a lot of force, and with EBO, you want to see that they don't have Ice Storm. That's the thing you got to watch out for, you know, because they have that one site that's outside of the shield, and you know people will put Luke there. I just, you know, you just dark side Hunt Down dual player just starts to salivate when you see Luke at that marker, because they may be overestimating you and it might be time to bring it home. But yeah, you can hit them with a Monarch first, lost, and if they have doubles, great. If they don't, and you know, I don't really ever bank on getting. When I played Johnny Chu in that match, I think I hit him for like maybe 4 speeders or something like that. You know, I don't even really need that, because if you can get your game going, 4 force is like nothing. You know, I mean, with Hunt Down, that like you make them lose so much force. But anyway, I do that mostly to screen for dual tech or for Ice Storm, or a BG barrier, right? Just to know what you're dealing with. And yeah, then you can plop him down. It's an amazing ability, honestly, to be able to pick him up with 4 force, especially with EPP Vader. And that's a great time. Again, it's a lot of force, but that is a great time for people who are maybe a little scared to duel. They're more risk averse, right? That is a great time to come down with Vader and Tarkin. And if you have blast, if you can do maybe end of their turn Twi'lek Advisor to grab blast door controls, that is the nail in the coffin to come down with Tarkin, Vader, initiate. It's great. So it's a great ability to pick up. But yeah, it definitely means you are sweating a little bit. I don't know what the equivalent for that would be with another deck, kind of like maybe when a Brigham deck is having trouble deciding where to put Emperor. Like, do they want to? They really can't decide. Do they want him at the Death Star 2 docking bay for extra force, or do they want him at throne room to use Emperor's power, or are they going to try to move him over to like some battleground docking bay to shock someone? But yeah, that's just a slightly tougher place for Huntdown to have to use that, but it's a great ability.
Agreed. Agreed. Um,
Did you want to talk about You Are Beaten? I don't know how we're
yeah,
doing for
yeah.
time.
Let's talk about European. We mentioned it a couple of times, so yeah, let's talk about it. So, why do you like this so much?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just curious, not to be too rhetorical, but what's your reaction to seeing You Are Beaten in here?
I mean, my first reaction is that I like it because you are running Crush Rebellion, right? Crush Rebellion, they lose one force to cancel Clash of Sabers, right? So Clash is the light side version, which kind of does the same generic thing of the main usage of two force, target not move or battle. So if you have Crush Rebellion, which I assume you do because of Anti-Revolution, you can do what they can. But I'm guessing it's probably the last ability, Cancel Uncontrollable Fury, which several light
Yeah,
side decks love to hurt poor EPP Vader with.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is why I use it, because a training deck is I actually like this deck versus training, but you have to play a pretty tight game and they're probably going to be hitting you with AFAs and projective telepathy is a pretty fair swap for You Are Beaten. It's like, are you more worried about AFAs or uncontrollable fury? And yeah, with all the EPP Vaders, I am worried about uncontrollable fury. um because it probably means that it's like you don't actually see uncontrollable fury that much, so you can kind of scrub it out and just say, I'm not going to worry about uncontrollable fury, to hell with it. But smart players will use this card. Obviously you need ability 4 on the table, right?
Yes. Correct.
So if they've got Yoda, they're good. But yeah, some deck might have like Super Falcon or something, and obviously if we're playing DS2, very very possible you're going to be facing Super Falcon. But yeah, no, it's kind of a versatile card. You Are Beaten, because it can help you against just another, it's like a deadly ping. I guess honestly, I might kind of prefer to knock out a ping than I lose one AFA. I personally will just kind of shrug it off and keep going. But uncontrollable fury, I don't like that. I don't like having to calculate multiple turns of losing force. I just want to get that card out of here. And beyond that, right? It's a great card to pitch to Visage of the Emperor. That's not a strong recommendation, but you could pitch it to Visage. And it is a versatile card. If I'm spread really thin in DS2, you have to be spread really thin to satisfy honor. Probably fourth time I've said that today.
Yeah.
You may have just Mara out, you may have just Vader out, you may not have a barrier. But if they come down, you can lock someone up. And let's say they come at Mara with like Obi, You Are Beaten and then move Vader over next turn. And then of course there's just kind of the reason most people play You Are Beaten, which is that like you might just steal the game off some total nonsense, where let's say they do have a bit of a stronghold of like Han, Chewie, Luke, or like maybe Ben Kenobi, um, General, we used to call him, and let's just say like Leia and Chewie Protector or something, or just some pretty strong, or something with like Wedge, right? Um, Wedge Antilles, the one who can cancel destinies. They could have a stronghold, and a little bit redundant because I kind of just want to come down with Vader and duel and move away anyway, or then it's just like that's a pretty rare situation that you duel and you need to worry that much about your force. But yeah, you could come down, duel someone, you are beating someone, and then battle one character, and that's game. Or just like I said, freeze them and then help limit their again, I don't worry too much about my opponent's positioning with this deck, but it's always good to control your opponent's positioning when you can, so you can freeze them, move in with someone. But other cards that I would switch out for You Are Beaten would be You Cannot Hide Forever. I think pretty obvious. I'm not a huge fan of that card just because I don't worry too much about hitting the Jedis. I just kind of want to duel them. But obviously, that's a great ability to have. And you'll find yourself sometimes, again, like I say, if you lose Vader, try to not concede. Try to, honestly, you still have Mara, even if you lose Vader. And Mara's a spy. She's sneaky. She can come in at a non-battleground and just get a duel started. But yeah, you may have Evazan and Dengar against Obi or something. That's something that happens. And yeah, obviously having You Cannot Hide Forever helps in a situation like that. But when it comes to the tournament, I'm gonna think about bringing this in instead of You Are Beaten. Just because you may face numbers, and numbers is just like so devastating. You can eat one numbers and lose 8 force or something and still hang in there. But if you get hit with too many numbers, you are probably going to lose. So yeah, it's you kind of, I mean, and talk, I don't know. Sometimes people play one numbers, and I think that's a pretty sharp move to play, just because you're not banking too much on whether or not they play hide, but it can totally hurt someone. I think like Johnny Chu used like maybe X1 in his obs or something like that, and that's obviously a smart way to go. But yeah, that's something I might bring in instead of You Are Beaten, just to shield myself from numbers. But I don't worry too much about numbers because I'm waiting for their Luke. And if they have Luke out to satisfy numbers, that means that's a condition they have to satisfy. That means Luke is out to satisfy numbers. Luke is not out in order to keep themselves safe from dueling or just equalize the visage loss. Luke is out for their purposes, and that could be a liability for them. And again, that's why Mara, I don't do two Mara in Reflections too, but two Mara is I think you need it in this because, and notice I don't play EPP FET, by the way. That's another thing. That's because I want Fett Enslave against Space, and I want to throw down that hard against Slave, because if I probe and don't get, one of the games I lost in that DS2 tournament last time was when I probed all their systems but one system, and the last one was their hidden base. That happens. But with and that was for that build. I think I actually used 3 TIE scouts, which is great against hidden base because you're force choked. You got the hyper speed, pretty great destiny. But yeah, they can take it out like nothing with a laser cannon, and you have no immunity. But Fett and Slave, that's actually a little hard to remove because you have no battle damage from security precautions. But yeah, anyway, I think point made about Hyde. I think it's a solid card. I definitely would recommend people use it in Huntdown if they whatever are worried about meta or it fits their play style. But other cards that I think are good, honestly, Disarmed is a pretty good one to go with, just in case you are against Big Luke. It really helps against that. Um, in Reflections 2, I would do maybe Omnibox It's Worse, just because sometimes people might do, it could be worse to try to cut damage from a duel or just kind of mid-late game chip away at you with it could be worse. It's, but that's not, I don't, that's not really my priority. But yeah, I don't use grabbers in this build. There's no room for it. Reflections 2, I actually use 3 tentacles to try to face Watcher Step. I feel like there's one other Destiny 5 card that I was thinking of. I don't know if anything I don't know. Is there anything you would put in instead of You Are Beaten?
Well, I don't know. Operational plan. Some decks use this just because place one card from hand on top of force pile, so they'll put this there and then like move or something, or they use this for Janus to try to stack destinies. Doesn't do much on its own, but that's the only other thing. But instead of the You Are Beaten, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, so I feel like there's one other Destiny 5 I was thinking of, but yeah, no, I mean, I think the obvious choices are just like hide or disarmed. It was somewhat control-based effect. Anyway, that'll be a little breadcrumb for whoever watches this. Like, there's some other Destiny 5 card that might be good to put in here instead of URB. And like I said, I don't play Resistance just because I'm not too worried about the force loss. And that's what I do with my props is I want to disrupt their deck. It's kind of like for people who played Magic the Gathering, hand disruption. If you can take a lot of hits, if you can ruin their resources, then you're just going to be playing like a damaged version of their deck. Yeah, Force Lightning is actually a one I've thought of.
Yeah.
It just doesn't cut it for me with only the two emperors, and like, what am I really going to do with emperor? It's kind, Janus. Some people play Janus or EPP Fet again, but I just like I'm a little underwhelmed by Janus. It's like I don't know, like it's a yes. We all yes the situation where it's Emperor with both his aides draining +1, and you get an extra destiny. But yeah, maybe in Brigham that makes sense. You need to hold all the sites. But yeah, in this, I just if they come at me, I'm spread thin, barrier or something, and then just try to set up a duel. So
Yeah, well, there is I have you now,
yep,
which more of a non-duelers like to use it. They're trying to fight me to fight
definitely,
Obi, and maybe it's not it's underwhelming because it's just like one extra destiny against Leia or one extra destiny against or Marco. It is a 5. It is grabbable via
yeah.
Crush the Rebellion, which I thought was interesting that you chose not to use it. I guess maybe it's just not good enough. Maybe that's what
I
it
don't.
is.
I don't like it in dueling just because I honestly I would rather play an extra Vader's Obsession than I have you now. Because you just lose it first turn, and then they might sort of think, oh, okay, he is he's on his back foot here. He's only got one obsession, and I've got Run Luke Run. Three Vader's Obsession. I love Three Vader's Obsession. In CNV, there's a great format, Oto. Some of us play original trilogy only. I mean, it does have Reflections 2 characters in it. Just we kind of those get honorary status just because of how old school Shadows of the Empire is.
Yeah.
That's all we had for years for people who maybe like a lot of people, and this is something really interesting about Star Wars. It is the primary cultural input for a lot of people. There's so much in terms of just wisdom and the critique of evil in Star Wars. The nature of myth, the nature of insanity, the question of does a father submit his son to the forms of abuse that made him a force to be reckoned with. And of course, in the last possible minute, Vader decides that he will not. But that was Luke's grace that he extended to Vader, and Vader says, "Tell Leia that you were right." But there's a lot of people who look to Star Wars for kind of a roadmap or a modern myth or any of that. And I say that apropos of Reflections too, and Shadows of the Empire. That was like a big deal when that came out. So anyway, not to have too much of a tangent with that, but yeah. Anyway, Um, OTO format. I use Three Vader's Obsession because Jedi's Resilience is just ugly, terrible, terrible, terrible card for Hunt Down is Jedi's Resilience. And yeah, I think Hunt Down really takes a big blow in CNV. And yeah, Jedi's Resilience, that's the one where, yeah, one, you can just send your character with a lightsaber to your use pile, but also they just cancel your duel after you've already wagered your character. They could lose and then they play it. And then, you lose your focused attack. You don't get your focused attack back. If you're playing Darth Vader's lightsaber and you throw it, you don't get that back. And you do get your duel back. So that's something. But yeah, against Watch Your Step, I would love to play three Vader's Obsessions in Reflections too, because Watch Your Step not only has Run Luke Run, but on 7 side, they can replay Run Luke Run and that just sucks. But
It's true.
that's kind of how you have to win against Watch Your Step. I'm not saying I've done it that much. It's a very tough match, but you have to they can only retrieve one card, replay one interrupt per turn, and that's the bar you have to set for yourself. That if they control tunnel vision during your turn or something, that means they're not going to be able to replay their run Luke run. And yeah, maybe a good, I don't know what other, we could hit on more stuff too, but that's something I love about Reflections 2 is that you get your split cards, so you can search Monarch out. You don't have to keep an extra spot for Evader. You don't have to like get into this nonsense of spreading super, super thin. Um, and you have to answer to Watch Your Step and Watch Your Step and Obs. And if people want to play Watch Your Step and Obs, they are obviously free to do that. And I don't have a problem with that because I just don't want to play those decks. They're too overpowered for me. But I think it's cool that other decks have to answer to them. They're kind of like, Thomas Hobbes Leviathan, where, there's the big bad boy who keeps everyone in check. And that actually brings a certain level of order and logic to a field. And, and a meta game is a field, it's actually many fields. There are many different metas. And people sometimes feel like, oh, someone's not respecting the meta. And you kind of have to just suck that up, obviously, as a player and be like, oh, you shouldn't have played this or something. But, the meta it only extends as far as you're able to push it or call people out on. And that's what's nice about Reflections too, is that, people have to, like Mikos, right? Big thing. And, the Reflections 2 modified tournament was a great time. But yeah, Mikos, I mean, was just a monster, right? In that format where it's like a blob. You just keep cutting off its arms and its heads, or it's a Hydra or whatever you want to call it. And they just keep chugging away. That's why I played There Is Good in Him. It's great against Mikos. But yeah, I mean, Mikos without space, it can't do anything against Watch Your Step, right? And so anyway, I like when Watch Your Step is, it kind of keeps Huntdown honest, because it means, wow, I may actually feel like I need more than one Vader's Obsession, and that's going to constipate the deck a little bit. Or, I use 3 tentacles and a lateral damage and Boskin Houndstooth. And I don't, maybe I use Tie Scout, I'm not even sure. But yeah, no, you have to stay pretty honest. And I don't know if I play Bad Feeling of I. And Bad Feeling of I is so amazing against Prophet. It's pretty good against TRM also. But yeah, I don't know if I played Bad Feeling in my Reflections 2. So anyway, that's kind of my case for Reflections 2, is that like, yeah, I get it. It's not fun playing all the Watch Your Steps or the Obs, but no, I think it's interesting. And I like that Lightside gets Current Horn. I think Control Tunnel Vision is a cool card for Lightside to get. And, while Honor is very needed for Lightside, because again, I mean, it's like, the idea of a dark side only player, right? Like, no shade, but we've all seen that. Being a dark side only player is kind of easy because, you go first, you've got basically the advantage. And Honor really takes a lot of that back. And, DS2, it's sort of like the heyday of M&T. You can just come in with Honor. You can right. And another thing about No Escape is that it hurts nudge sites, right? The diamond sites. So anyway, yeah, I like that. I like to see TRM nudge tamed a little bit. And I like that everything's tamed. Even Huntdown is tamed a little bit by Watch Your Step. You kind of have to. So imagine, right, having to fit 3 tentacles into this. It's not the easiest thing.
No.
So yeah, no, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on, or but yeah, I think this has been great.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess my only other question would be, kind of, I guess around, I guess deck choices a little bit. You talk about
Yeah.
propaganda version, you talk about using different
Mhm.
tentacles. So
Yep.
are you kind of like swapping the propagandas out for Reflections 2 versions a little bit? Because
No,
in
that's a
basic,
great,
yeah.
great question. Yes, I only play 2 prop in my Reflections 2. And that's, it kind of does the damage, and they don't really know that. And again, this is where I'm just not super into teching. People teching is like, all right, so I'm just, that's good. Everyone, you can know I only play 2 props in my Reflections 2 if you care. But people might think you play more. They usually will. If they see 2 props, they're like, oh, he might have 3 or 4. So you do still get the psychological edge of playing propaganda. But yeah, I only use two. And again, that's why shouldn't Hunt Down have to cut down on a card like this? Just kind of this Destiny 6 card that just punishes space really in a brutal way. Why shouldn't they have to be tamed? And God forbid you play tentacles and actually have to respond defensively to your opponent's deck. So yeah, I cut that out. I still play two Visage, although I had to think about that. I don't use two Mara in that deck. I use Shizor. I love Shizor in this deck. I go back and forth with Dark Deal sometimes about Shizor. He hates Shizor and Huntdown Duel. He hates it because of the one Destiny. But yeah, I love late. If someone steps to Executor, you can come down with Shizor. He's so good for that. And then so he's over there. You can leave him at a Holo Theater. There are some games, I'll just throw this in there just by way of strategy for people, where I will throw Emperor to Holo Theater. And that's where I really, really, really just need my Visage going. And I to keep it short, I'm not going to list all the situations where I need to keep Visage going, but I think if you play this deck or play Hunt Down Duel, you're going to know there are some games where you just really want Visage going, probably against a space deck that has heavy damage output itself. But there's nothing wrong with putting Emperor at Holo Theater, because they're not going to really be able to do much against him there. They're going to have to commit. Think how much they have to commit if they want to try to uproot Emperor from Holo Theater. Granted, you lose your chance to get the Janus Drain bonus, but yes. Anyway, back Reflections 2, I play Shizor. I only play one Mara because you can grab Mara with HoloNet transmission too. You don't really need two Mara. And what else? What do I not play? Well, you get an extra slot from having
You,
Monarch and Evader split.
you do. I mean, like, what about Point Man? Because a million decks,
Yes,
order
that's
to
it.
engage. Yes.
That's the card. Thank you. That was the extra Destiny 5 card I was trying to think of. Point Man's great. Point Man's great in this deck. COTVG has a version of Prophet that I think he might use Boshuda. He loves Boshuda. But yeah, he's a big fan of obviously Evasion Prophet, which is right. I know Teacher was an early Prophet player, and people say Teacher says, right, he invented Evasion Prophet. He was an early Prophet player. I think his Teacher might have been in Seattle at that time. I'm not sure. Shout out Teacher. But yeah, you're gonna want to probably use two dodge because you're gonna want to protect Han. And what are you going to be slugging it out with Han? I mean, it's a really interesting thing. The time when a Prophet does, maybe you might have seen one of my games the other day. I had just Master Luke and EPP Han at Audience Chamber, and they can step and they can kill Han, but they might lose they might lose 6 to 8 force in that process, and that's a trade-off for them. But anyway, CUTVG loves to dodge around and dodge his character into a site that you already have characters, and just he'll just chip away at you with order. And yeah, I was using my Abyss Hunt Down against him, and he just killed me with order. But yeah, I mean, Point Man's great. Who doesn't love Point Man? And that's another card I would think about. Honestly, here's the thing. In a meta that was just really sick mains and toys, and maybe some percentage of strong space decks, I would probably play Point Man. But when it comes to the tournament, I don't worry too much about playing an M&T deck. And I feel like that's my game to win. If I'm facing M&T, that doesn't mean I'm going to be cocky and be blind dueling or something, or be salty if I lose, right? Just for the point of it. But if I'm against an M&T, my win condition's there, and I have time to set it up. And I don't worry too much about Point Man, and I think COTVG used 2 Run Luke Run in that deck too, right? Which really proves what we're talking about here. That I just want to touch people with Vader. I don't worry too much about battling people. But if they're playing, for example, a really defensive Prophet deck with obviously the dodges and the barriers and all that stuff, right? I think he uses like two. He plays a lot of fours to try to really bounce people with, and he will bounce people like crazy with his Master Luke. Um, yeah, yes. Order really can hurt sometimes against this deck, mainly because if you lose 6 force to order, you've lost. You've probably lost Tarkin. Right? You've probably lost a lot of your goodies, and that's you got to watch out for order against this deck for sure. I feel like order is a little hard to really abuse. Um, I'm not saying it's that hard. It's a pretty like ridiculous card, and it's cool. It's a cool example of what they were doing with Dagobah in terms of like, all right, so light side goes second. We don't really have the nasty characters on the same level, right? All the different ways. Let's, maybe some other time we can come back and I'll come back and talk about dark side versus light side. But this was great. One of the things they did with, I mean, AFA, obviously that's a step too far, but like I said, that's not AFA is not my least favorite card. What really really is tough for me is just like I'm playing against an HBX deck and I'm getting bad draws. That's a tough. You have to play a perfect game against HBX. Um, right? And that's just it's actually pretty great. Like if you get first turn Vader against HBX, it's like it's on. You just have to do their dance. They kind of set the tone of the game. They can't step to you on the ground, and you just dance with them and walk them into the ground. And great thing, and I'm glad I didn't forget to say this, is against training to a certain extent, but really EBO or HBX, watch for them to come at you with a YOLO Luke or a YOLO Obi with Saber, and that's when they're done.
Okay.
Because if it's late game, you probably have mostly fives and sixes in your deck. You've probably got your like both duels and a focused attack, and then it's curtains when they come at you, and that's a legit thing. That's a bit. That's if I'm just playing a non-dual deck, they can come at me and YOLO, and who knows? They get good draws that could really unseat me from my position. But um, yes, I don't worry too much about the ground battles really. But that being said, yeah, are really, really, really skilled players. Like the top 5 players, they're gonna be good MNT players for sure. And I don't really see them use. I know Torch and maybe CNV had this interesting hidden base, and Torch, shout out Torch, obviously, does some cool stuff with hidden base mains, and he uses like the squadrons, the ones that are 3 unique dot ability too, those ones, and yeah, he anyway, whatever, hidden base, but yeah, people will come at you with EPPs late game and you duel them and it's curtains. But yeah, it's actually kind of hard in my opinion to really excel with an M&T deck to a certain point. I'm not to a certain point. It's like kind of a no-brainer where you've got Vader, you've got all these, you got whatever, right? Obi, right? Big immunity, big ability, one destiny, big deal. But what I worry about is HBX, because if I don't get my perfect draws, it's like, it's you're done when they get that choke on you when
Yeah.
they flip. That's like the sleeper hold. But yeah, I would say that if there was a meta that was less focused on space cheese, I would be playing Order. But Order is another great card to use in this deck, and I'm glad you remembered about that.
Definitely. I guess the only thing we talk about blind dueling. Obviously, there are
Yeah,
two different kinds of duels. There is the default duel from the card, and there's the epic duel. Obviously, epic duel, they
yeah,
lose a lot more force when they lose that. Are there
yeah,
times where you're just like, okay, I don't want to risk it, but I want to kill Obi, and I'm just going to circle him? I guess there's never a reason to use
yeah.
Vader's obsession otherwise other than the epic duel. Go ahead.
That's a really good point. That would be very rare. I don't think I've ever done that for one, but I guess that was so this situation means I've obviously scanning my deck. I have bad destinies. I can't wait. I would always prefer to wait and do the epic duel. So that's one thing, right? So that means I can't wait. I've got bad destinies and I need Obi off the table immediately. So I'm sure that there are situations. I can't think of what that would be. Um, I don't know. Maybe like I have I've uncontrollable fury on me and I lost my Yab and I'm like, I need Obi off the table so I'm not losing 2 force, and I have bad destinies, and I'm gonna lose, and I'm gonna kill him anyway because Obi's off the table, and then like it's not impossible, but I am almost well. Here's the other thing: is if they have dual tech, then I'm still screwed, right? Because they can do courage against a non-epic dual circle, um, right? So, yes, I guess it does save me from swing and a miss. It does save me from what's the other good one? Glancing blow.
Yeah,
That's and
true.
that's a serious thing if people are playing EPPs to get hit with glancing blow. It's a little card intensive to play, but definitely no joke. And that's another card that actually might make me want to rush it and get a duel off. And just, it's just that's the thing that's a little scrubby, or just to say it cheesy with Huntdown, because like someone could be a good player who has good positioning and good deck construction, and I can just sort of make the game all about me and my game, and like like what was it, Mike Tyson or whatever, or some great athlete was like, if I lose, that's on me. It's Huntdown's kind of like that, and that is something that's a little annoying about Huntdown, is that like they could be doing great and I can just like, oh, okay, they failed to protect themselves from this duel, right? And I'm all stocked and ready to go. But yeah, I very rarely, and I don't really go for the normal non-epic version of Vader's Obsession either. I mean, again, when would I use that? Just to try to explore that? Maybe I really need some force back for whatever reason that is. I really need something back that's right at the top of my loss pile. And let's say I don't have Visage out, right? Because because if you do a non-epic duel, you lose your objective, and then you lose your protection from Visage of the Emperor. So that's a big reason not to do. Obviously, you don't want to force drain at the executor. And that's a reason I don't like to do the non-epic duels at all. I mean, I love that you said that, because I would have never even thought to say that. To me, that's like so obvious, but no, it's actually a really good point, because there are some strengths to the non-epic. I mean, in Brigham, obviously, Circle is incredible. I
Yeah,
love Circle
yeah,
in Brigham. Um, but yeah, Vader's upset. That's an interesting one. You can get force back from it, and it is kind of, yeah, you move right to them. So like, I don't know what that would be. I mean, here's again, we're getting really theoretical here, but if I'm playing a deck that uses Path of Least Resistance or something, I could move over to them, and that's actually pretty real. In CNV, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much with my what the hell is that deck? The Quiet Mining Colony, but that is a broken deck in OTO format or CNV. Broken when you have sometimes Dark Deal and I go back and forth on this because he thinks it's better than Watch Your Step, or I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's he's feels it's at least on par with Watch Your Step, maybe even better, just because you can tunnel vision every turn. And let me tell you, with Path and that deck, it's kind of like Run Luke Run on steroids, where you can just go, you can do horrific beatdowns to people with like, you have like Broken Leia, of course. The only thing I don't like, quick side note about CNV, and it's a really fun format, is that they took out Big Fat, um, who's, yeah, that's, I get it. He's a pretty abusive character with crazy card economy, but I do not like paying that 2 force every turn. It's not fun. It adds up. Same for Han Chewie and the Falcon. That's not the best card, just because you got to have that 3 force. And like I said, I played decks where I had my first QMC before I really fine tuned it, where I used Han Chewie and the Falcon, and it does suck to have that 3 force that you're paying. And then remember, with QMC, you have to pay a force to get a site. Some people don't like that, and whatever, you got to save a force for what all the things, to be able to dodge away, or in case they have, first strike or barrier or what have you. But that is a broken deck in CNV and OTO. I'd love to see more people use that in the CNV tournament coming up. But anyway, what you can do with that, you can bring that Leia, and that Leia is a monster. She's so good against Mikos. Ridiculous. You can just cancel 2 drains by putting cards on top. You can give her Anakin Saber, which is really nice. But yeah, you can. I kind of feel like CNV took out the cards that I don't even hate that much. And, like, what's that one where you can do the free executor? Um,
Never
right.
shall again leave the city.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I mean, that's fine, fair enough. But I mean, that's something I really have to watch out for with that deck is obviously this card. But we've got that. We've still Leia is just a heinous card who's just so good. It's cool picture, cool card, cool destiny, right? But yeah, they kind of took out, and I mean, obviously, Hunt Down hates Jedi's resilience, but fair enough, right? Kind of just tilts the scales back more in favor of Brigham, and like, Brigham, that's the real heel deck. It's like God, right? I mean, I just would feel guilty sometimes playing a heavy sack Brigham against people. It just is. It's cool, really cool deck, and you got to be ready to lose that one force and they get to pull Luke. That's cool, right? That's a nice weakness. But yeah, for me, Bringham's kind of the heel deck of like, you just kind of beat up on people, and you don't need to worry about all that. It's just mains and toys, kind of on steroids. But um, I want to maybe real quick talk about Hunt Down non-duel before we wrap. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of I actually kind of like Blizzard 4 because in Hunt Down that's cool because you can actually do something different. I like to start, and this is in my CN. I don't do this in CNV because you can't use Blizzard 4, which is fine. It's a pretty broken card. But in my OTO deck, and let me know if you ever want to play some OTO matches. It's a fun, more kind of all out format. But
Yeah.
I do you conduct their search to search out backdoor. Um, and I use like 3 Blizzard 4s or something, or maybe 2, and then you can just do a nice like first turn Vader, any Vader you want. You could use the immunity. I use immunity Vaders in those decks too, and just get a first turn Vader. Sometimes with a saber, you're draining for 3 immediately. And but again, I like you kind of need Blizzard 4 for that to work because then they just lost in the wilderness. That's a big risk. But anyway, CNV is a fun format, and I would like to see, if we could even, that would be great to get OTO as a drop down option because it's a pretty. I'm not saying we need to have tournaments for it or whatever, but it's a pretty cool, pretty fun format where it's like, why not use the big maintenance cost cards? I think like maintenance cost Chewy. I mean, it's not that great. It's okay, but I mean, you've already got Chewbacca Protector. And it's just kind of interesting. And again, I'm just saying this again, not to repeat myself, but I like CNV. It's fun, but we still got Leia. We still got that keeping them out forever. That card that makes QMC really good. And yeah, we've got that. I mean, that's fine, fair enough. But we've still got I just feel like the maintenance cards are not even the best Reflections 3 cards personally. But anyway, I don't, maybe just real quick, what I just want to say about non-dual hunt down is like, I kind of feel like non-dual hunt down is more solid. And this, not to bury the lead here with this talk, but if you're playing dual hunt down and you have to keep your high destinies managed, you probably can't play Executor. You definitely can't play Chimera. You definitely can't play Thrawn, right? I do have a flops deck that uses like, I think I only use 3 EPP Vaders, but I used commands, Imperial commands. I use Thrawn. I use the Executor with Destiny 4. But anyway, non-dual hunt down, you can shamelessly just go for Chimera and Executor, and that's so strong against HBX. I don't want to speak out of turn too much because I don't have that much experience using that against HBX, but I mean, you really get some powerful space if you can not worry about your destinies. And yeah, right. This is again my thing is that like a lot of your toughest matches in a tournament are not going to be M&T. So like what are you doing as a hunt down duel player where you're carrying all these duels that will not help you in your toughest match? And I think I don't want to say unconsciously, but I think that's the unwritten rule for why so many people play hunt down non-duel is they don't want to worry about carrying all this baggage of dueling, and they don't want to worry about their destiny so much because they don't want to lose the game or like be thrown into late game with Mara as your only dueling option because you lost a duel with Vader because you wanted to play heavy space, or you wanted to play Commander Merrick, or
Yeah.
Ozzel, or these great characters. You can't do any of that in Hunt Down Duel, and that's so you do get the like SWC, I think maybe COTVG, maybe like I want to say Brad, maybe I'm not sure, but you see people using non-dual hunt down, and it's like that is a serious deck, non-dual hunt down, because you just get an amazing start. I mean, you're not really worried too much about Visage because you might just be unflipped and say to hell with it. But I mean, you've got Visage, that's not nothing. You're accelerating the game, and often you will be flipped. It's not like you'll never be flipped. But yeah, you've got the space muscle. You can play X2 projective telepathy to really shield you from AFA. And I see, again, I just like duels because I feel like it's the best way to address how powerful M&T is. And hunt down non-duel, especially if they just do. I mean, most people don't use Epic Duel if they're not playing duel. That's like a cool little psyop that you can do. But and people will test you anyway, right? But anyway, I mean, right? I think it's kind of a no-brainer, right? That hunt down duel is just better against M&T.
Well, yeah.
And that's usually what I see for. It's like, when have you ever seen? I mean, right? I know there's like kind of like legendary Johnny Chu, HBX, and all that, but for the most part, what do you see for top three? It's like almost always TRM,
Yeah.
and I guess the kind of shadow of TRM is Prophet, because I think, and this is Dark Deal, you guys got into a lot of this. Prophet is so good against the meta because your damage output's so good. Let's say they do ISB, or they can't really throw down with aliens. You just get free reign of Tatooine in the audience chamber. Let's say they do ties, right? A tie deck. We're like, oh God, right? I mean, you're just like, they're retrieving all this force from like CNR fleet, and they're dropping the squadrons, retrieving 3. They're like, maybe they're just, draining at Kifix, all this stuff. It's just such an annoying, oppressive deck to play against ties. And TRM is not, I don't think is, I mean, that's the weakness of TRM. I had a really interesting loss with my TRM in the DS2 to, I think it was Adam CFC, using a Imperial Occupation Sullust Clouds deck. And I was like, oh my, like, what is this? Right? You see this. And basically, I had nowhere to put my characters to drain, right? And it kind of just came down to me throwing Home One and Super Falcon against his whole whatever the squadron assignments for Dark Side, whatever, right? Where defend all the Baron Suntir fell and all that stuff, and that, yes, exactly, and that he had that out against me, and there was just nothing I could do with TRM. But Prophet, or I'm not saying, I think it's actually kind of tough because you can't search out the cloud sectors with that objective, which is, I didn't even know that. I didn't even realize, yeah, combat response. I didn't even realize how hard that is actually to make work. But yeah, he just had a bunch of Presence of the Forces. He started, it's actually a really cool deck. There is no try and oppressive enforcement. And, he's just draining me. And there wasn't that much I could do. I kind of just had to fight him in space. It wasn't a space deck. I had all this beef and nowhere to put it. And, Prophet will actually do great in that matchup, because they free Han quick, making them lose heavy force. So the only problem with Prophet is that, right, I don't know. I
Well,
mean,
Prophet has a hard time in space. I mean, there are exceptions. I mean, there was one, top 8
yep,
where he had Prophet and he tried to do Super Home 1 at the same time. It's possible. I mean,
that's
there's a
fair.
couple prophets. Some prophets. I think Andy, Talaga, he had a prophet where
Yep,
he was doing the landing claw, so that they
for
could,
sure.
cancel it. But Prophet is so
Yeah, yeah,
fast, and the ping damage
yeah,
is so bad because you have Master
yeah,
Luke deploy for free, and you have all
yeah,
these cheap deployments relatively, And so usually they don't need space, but it's oppressive in the set that like if you're not prepared for Prophet, they can deal damage to you very, very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And usually, in my experience, the way to beat Prophet is you have anti-Prophet tech, like you have a disarmed, or maybe you're hunt down dueling and you're really ready to punish them for their mains.
Yep.
Or you have battle
Yep.
order, right? And you really
Yep.
like they lose the drain race. That's kind of
Yep.
the only ways works for me.
No, perfect analysis. I couldn't agree more. And so one thing though about Landing Claw and Prophet is that they are sacrificing their ground game with that.
Sure.
Just because that's a 2 destiny card, and they're playing ships also
Right.
with that, and home 1, that's a 1, is if they play the home 1 package, right? That's a lot of low destinies. And yeah, no, I definitely see that people do Kessel, right? And then maybe they're doing like a Boshuda on the ground or something interesting. But yeah, no, and that's fine. That's great, right? That's cool. I actually feel like that's kind of an unorthodox move for Profit, but they have to give up some ground game to do that. And basically, they're only taking like what we right. They have to really take that on the chin of maybe that could be sack cards, who knows what, right? So much good stuff, but really what you said I think was so key, which is that people can tech against Profit. That is the big thing. That Profit, you could play if Profit, let's say I was only playing, if Profit was the most popular deck I was playing and I wasn't going to worry about space at all, I would maybe think about using Force Lightning. Force Lightning's obviously great against Prophet, or and I've seen Torch do this before, if I'm not mistaken, go X2 Sniper sometimes. Or people sometimes like Trample, and people love Trample, obviously. And but non-dual hunt down, right? They can go with like, I'm not a huge fan of this, but they can go with like Igar Tempest 1, right? And to Trample, that's awesome, right? I mean, I actually, again, I don't, I not, it's not awesome for me because it's like 2/1 Destiny cards. You got to link that up, is what it is. Great in some, right? Anyway, good in some decks, but yeah, you can tech the hell out of Profit with like tramples and overloads, right? Um, and formats that have like set for stun control, to say nothing of like right, Evazan and disarmed, like you said, or sniper is just really really good against Prophet, because they can't dodge away from you. But that's the thing about Prophet, is that you can really tech against it, and you can't tech against TRM all that much unless you really kind of like what Adam CFC did. I'm not saying he definitely didn't tech against me. I would bet I was playing the deck that was the most dominant popular deck. Is that TRM, you can like can't tech against it too bad. Um, Whereas like Profit, and I mean, yes, I would love to hear someone say, how do you tech against TRM? Like, of course, there are things you could do, but it kind of just, I mean, really, like with TRM, to play against TRM, like they don't really have any first move, right? They have no first move. They're waiting to scoop down on you. They're not playing Cantina. They're not playing that 1/1 site that's drain +1. They are going to let you take the first move, and then they're going to come down on you with their activation and their mains. Honestly, I'm a big fan of AFA and Nudge TRM, and that's obviously very, very dirty stuff. But
Sure.
I think you kind of need AFA and Nudge TRM just to really get it going. If they're not making any moves, if they're playing a tie deck or something, like you're not going to have any drain potential. You're going to have to like go, I would say minimum two AFAs in Nudge TRM personally. But anyway, yeah, Profit, you can tech, that's I think is a little bit of a sore subject sometimes, is that like Profit is so good against the broad range of decks. And I'm a big fan of locked decks. I love when they lock decks in the top 8. One, because I like it when people are going to show their just skill and their passion and their understanding of a deck. But also, not everyone likes that. I think that was a piece of feedback that we once heard, was like, well, it's not that fun for people. So, and again, that's fine, right? This is a game. People have lives. Most of people on GEMP are like well into adulthood, and you want to, so you don't want to like have this whole throwdown experience with your deck that's your baby, right? But that's a little bit unfortunate because we all get salty, and
Sure.
everyone has feelings about losing. Everyone wants to win,
Sure.
and that's where the meta really comes in, because the meta is what I say, if we look at it kind of in an abstract way, the meta is what is the source of people's emotions about winning or losing. That's like, oh, you got me with this. No, when you shouldn't have done whatever. You use 3 force lightnings. Yeah, good luck playing that against my other deck or something. And I'm not saying everyone will get that upset, but that's, I think that's a justified feeling that you have to check if you're playing, if you want to be a good loser and be supportive of the community, is that people will know that you play Hunt Down. You can tech against Hunt Down too. That's another thing. You can play multiple revolutions. And I actually don't think it's that bad facing multiple revolutions, because you just kind of wait for the right time to grab your evader. They lose a couple force. You can work with it. But yeah, you can tech against Hunt Down. I mean, for example, people don't really commonly use courage or transmission terminated in DS2, because Hunt Down is already answered by Honor of the Jedi. And basically, like Andy said, just play Brigham. He's 100% right. And
Yeah.
Brigham has so many things to recommend it over this. In space, being able to get that extra Emperor destiny in space is so, so good. But anyway, that's the thing. That's why I think just that lock decks are so cool. And, maybe I'll have to run a tournament myself or something if I want to see that happen. Is that it just means that the decks that are a little more fragile, that are really good against just any deck you could see on Gemp, period. There are some decks that are better against the field. The Prophet and
Sure.
Huntdown are probably those two decks. But it's a little bit tragic, because if someone's like a famous Prophet player or whatever, that means, yes, I get it. So it's like chill, so they don't play Prophet or something, someone could say. But that's a little bit too bad, because if I see someone heroically fighting it out with Prophet or something, or any weird deck, or even, let's say, training, right? I could play Broken Concentration in this deck too, by the way, just to bring it back to You Are Beaten for a second. I could play Broken Concentration, and that's amazing against training, and it's a decent card, period, to bring in sort of that torch, DTF beggar dynamic, and it's great with dueling too, right? If I like put out first strike, I bring in Broken Concentration, they can't do anything, or they can't play Run Luke Run, they can't play Courage, any of that stuff. But I mean, and that's part of CCG, is that you can tech for people, and that's just part of it. You can't fight it. It's kind of like looking at signs in sports. That's something COTVG said. But it's a little bit too bad to see someone. I'm just like, like, how much props would you really give me if like this was my deck, and then I'm like, I just put in Broken Concentration against training. It's like, no, it's fine, but it's not the coolest thing in the world, right? So anyway, um, yeah, that's just tying it all together, right? That's why I really like Hunt Down Duel, is I feel like in a locked tournament, it just kind of has the most answers for everything. You're fine against space. You're fine against space. You can do it. That's what I was saying. You got to play a perfect match against HBX, kind of, and you can get their hidden base. You can totally do it. With these ships that the 3 ships, it's enough. You can do it. Okay, 2 barriers, right? You can do it. But but I need to play Executor too. And I don't mean to strike a pejorative tone for people who maybe don't want to play on Down Duel. That's obviously more power to anyone who wants to play any deck. It's a game. Play whatever you want to play, right? Just for the 100th time, if I need to say that. But I'm just saying for myself, that would be a little bit like, oh, I mean, I need to just bully up on against space that much more, and I just don't think you need it, because if I do that, then I sacrifice my standing against what are really the top decks, right? Anyway, I don't want to overstate it, because yeah, no, non-dual hunt down's great, but I right, I would just, that's my case, and I think it seems like you're on the same page with me. It's just, this is just better against M&T, but you're really committing. You're committing. You're worse against space, period, if you're carrying all this dual protection, and people, so you're more vulnerable to people teching against you, because that's actually a win condition for your opponent, if you think about it. If they know you're playing Hunt Down, they can just play 3 dual tech cards, and that's just very tough. to play. So anyway, that's my thing about sort of my little spiel about teching and locked decks and all that, and just how interesting the meta game is in this game. And so I say just let it be interesting. And you know, I'll play anyone anytime. I'm always down to just run multiple sets with people. But that's, you know, that's the cool thing about tournaments is you get to play people who don't really play that much. You know, top players. And I just wish that, you know, there was more just play of top players using top decks. And then because that's where the game really shines. But um and if people are all just doing that, then like you're not going to be able to like you can't just do a one-sided deck. You're going to get stomped by all these other good players playing good decks. But yeah, that's kind of what I think would be great to see in the future is just maybe lock decks. Why not? You know, or just keep locking decks in top 8. That's cool too.
No, I think it's a good idea. And actually, Dark Deal told me something similar. He also kind of wants a, you know, a format where you're, you know, locked throughout the entire run. I mean, right now we kind of have like a mixed one where we're kind of like unlocked until you get to the top 8, and then the top 8 you get locked.
Right.
It's kind of like it's a halvesy. It might be nice to do
Yeah,
the other way around.
exactly.
No, I agree with you. So yeah,
But no, I appreciate that you have just been kind of pushing these. Like I saw you the other day, you were like, "Oh, why don't more people play secret plans?" I completely agree, you know. And that's a really legit question to ask because, you know, why don't people play secret plans? Because they want to play I Have You Now. They want to play more beef.
yeah,
They want to play 2 point mans or something like that. And yeah, they're not worried about retrieval. And a lot of people skate by without when I was using the Our Most Desperate Hour deck, I really saw how few people use secret plans. I didn't do amazing with that deck, but I was able to retrieve a fair amount of force. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I like that you've been kind of asking these questions about, you know, why people are doing what with the meta, and you know, taking a look at the top decks, and you know, and that's because that's how you kind of answered the question of why do top decks look a little weird, right? Why are they always a little bit cheesier than the decks you see in casual play? Part of that is because people are throwing down and they just want to win the tournament. But part of that is because they're playing to the tournament field, that they have to be ready to face in a ton of space. You got to face, you know, like Tony Duva or JPC. Those are really, really strong space players that you know, they will weed you right out of a tournament, you know, and you know, I guess in a way as it should be, but I'm just saying like it's a different meta in tournaments, and it's honestly like it's a less interesting meta. I think it's hard to argue that. Someone could say, you know, Mandarin, you're making these arbitrary distinctions, you're attaching value where you shouldn't, and obviously you can really say that at any time to anyone about an issue that's not a major life and death issue, and this is just a game. So I've said that many times today, but you know, being that it's a game, it's also an opportunity to sort of set restrictions that allow for, you know, freedom of thought, you know, not to sound too grandiose, but you know, I heard someone criticizing games on X the other day saying, well, games are a perfect example of something where people feel they have free will but they don't. And it's like, yeah, but also it's a game, you know, so like we know it's a game, and you know, we're setting certain rules for how we're going to interact with each other, you know. And you know, there are different types of play, right? There are games, there's games of strategy, obviously chess, there's, you know, Star Wars CCG, and there's make believe play, right, where
yeah,
people will imagine something's happening in their minds, right? Like sometimes in a pejorative way, people will say, "Oh, it's like you're playing with little figures in the sandbox," and that's fine, right? I mean, it is a Star Wars game, but you know, it's not totally like that because you know we're not just, and this is why I always go with the meta over stuff that just is like fun and validating. I think the fun comes from the interesting meta and pushing yourself to make a cool deck. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you know, I mean, you don't really need to make believe quite so much because you have the rules lined up for you. Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of my thoughts about the meta and that's, to me, that's one of the most interesting things about the game is like not how do I win with Hunt Down. Hunt Down is like a pretty, in a way, easy deck to win with. But what's interesting with Hunt Down is how do you prepare yourself to face HBX and EBO and also face TRM? And while you're fighting those battles, you have to be ready to fight the nimblest deck of all, which is Prophet. I mean, if you're, Prophet is, if you're not ready for Prophet with this deck, let's say, Executor's not going to do that much against Prophet unless I'm going the whole like route of draining with Chiranu or whatever. Yeah, you could try to do that. Try to, Battle Order's not going to do anything against Prophet, and you're probably going to have to try to get them. But yeah, Prophet is serious. It's a serious deck that if someone's playing it right, I don't think there's many good. I don't want to say good. I don't think there's many strong players Prophet because I think it's easy to just have a bloated Prophet with like too many Hans or just I don't know. I feel like a mid-level Prophet is just like easy. You can just chew through it. But anyway, huge props to anyone who uses Prophet period because it's a really interesting deck that kind of forces you to think about a lot of different situations that you might encounter, and it doesn't really take any cheap shots at people.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we don't see a ton of profit level players of I think of Dark Deals
No,
caliber.
no,
I think I think I've seen Andy use it a little bit, once in a
a little
while.
bit. Yeah, I've definitely seen him. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
definitely seen him mess with Prophet for sure.
So, but no, I agree with you. Hidden Beast, it has Profit has been at the top eight in 2021 and 2024. So
Interesting.
nothing stops it from being seen. It didn't ultimately wasn't the, well, actually, I guess it was the winner with Bragness. I guess it was the winner technically speaking, but um,
It won. What did it win?
well, in 2021, remember Bastion won with
Okay.
Bragness,
Okay.
Glee, and
Right.
his light side was Profit, and
Right. Right.
so
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I
Right.
guess
Right.
technically did win. So
No, definitely. And he did good enough with it, with for the differential or to get there even.
oh
Oh
yeah,
God, I mean Brangus, that's very impressive deck too. I
100%.
just I can't track well enough to play Brangus, and the strategy of Brangus doesn't appeal to me too much. But yeah, obviously that's an amazing deck that is very very hard for Profit to face.
Yeah, no, 100%. All
Well, I
right.
don't know. Did we anything else we got? I feel like we covered a lot of ground today.
I guess the only thing we talked a little bit about space, right? You talked
Yeah,
about
yeah,
and so
yeah,
I get Zuckus, right? Zuckus, he
yep.
hyperspeed 5, you can move him.
Mm-hmm.
Boba Fett you typed on, there.
Mm-hmm.
TIE Scout,
Okay.
it makes sense because it's cheap. Now, I guess as long as you have, your
Yep.
security precautions. Okay, if they attack this out of nowhere, you're not going to
Yep.
lose 50 million force. A lot happens. I guess I was curious, like, what do you think about like Vader's shuttle, right? It's a little bit,
Yeah.
lower. It's one lower
Yeah.
destiny, but it costs the same as ability two. So I don't know if you ever like thought about like putting
It's
like
a good
Dengar or
point.
yeah,
It's a good point. It's a good point. Main thing is to me that's a little bit. If this was non-dual hunt down, I think that would be great because why not put Vader in space if you're non-dual hunt down? And that's a really cool ability that this has. That they have to, you know, sort of Zim status ability greater than 5. I think that's great. I don't like that it has less hyperspeed for one.
okay.
I guess my main point is that I use TIE Scout against Hidden Base. That's really the only if it's not it really doesn't do anything, but it has hyperspeed 5, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
And it's Destiny 4 again because it's dual because of the way I chose to approach the field of decks, and also this is just what I enjoy playing. I have to really watch my back and really watch my destinies. And TIE Scout is great for that because if you draw a 4, you're maintaining in a duel. That's like solid, because that just means just if to really break it down on a simple level, that means if you draw that and they draw a 3, you win, right? If you draw that, then they got to get a 5 or 6 to scale above you, and you can lose by 1 point. So I know I like the Destiny 4. I like the higher hyperspeed, and I don't really want Vader in space for one,
I mean, I don't think you have
because
to put Vader. I mean, I like this just because it's ability two, right? And ability two stacks.
yep,
That's pretty much everything, right? I mean, you're right. You wouldn't want to use the main ability for Vader. I'd have to really, craft a situation where
Yeah.
you'd want to put Vader in space in a hunt down dueling deck. But yeah.
Right. No, and even mainly just that I don't think you flip if you have him in space, right?
Well, if you play hunt down and you're there, and like it's same thing for EBO. Like if you deploy the outermost marker, you flip.
Yeah.
Like if there's no Obi or Luke, if then he walks into the base, it stays flipped. It only flips back if there's a Jedi
Right.
to
Yeah,
sight.
but
Yeah.
then that's like, right, think how now at this point, and I'm not, I mean, again, I love Vader's personal shuttle, but yeah, ability 2 wouldn't mean that much to me just because I'm not trying to just battle. Like, what would I, if I wanted to put something else with decent destiny? Again, I guess the Vader ability seems to have very low utility just because I'd have to like take off. And where am I going to do that? They'd have to a planet site, and like, so then that's just, they're playing Tatooine, they're playing Hoth. But then, like, if I'm playing EBO, I want Vader probably on the ground so that I can duel Luke.
Yeah.
If they drop Luke, that's the big thing. Is it removes? I think for dueling hunt down, I want Vader on point in point position to be able to just move in to duel people. So yes, it's. I think the right. What's the real win to playing Vader's personal shuttle is like I can stomp down on them with Vader, and they can't draw Destiny. But then I kind of stranded Vader in space, and that's a lot of force anyway to drop. So I would probably over that would rather play Bosk and Houndstooth.
Yeah.
You can definitely do some damage with Bosk and Houndstooth. At the point of playing Bosk and Houndstooth, though, I like to play lateral damage. And in this dual hunt, in my reflections too, I do Bosk and Houndstooth and lateral damage. And I maybe play, I might not play TIE Scout in that. Can look at that later. But um, Bosk and Houndstooth is too expensive versus HBX, in my opinion. And what do you really get for it? Like you still, it has no immunity. It doesn't stop them from drawing Destiny like Zim, and it's 8 force. And like, that's why I love TIE Scout. It's so cheap because if they're flipped and I need to pay double force to draw, I want to pay as little as possible to just get a little fast chip out and just move it around. Because the Vader's personal shuttle is pretty much just as easier to kill. And again, just to even max it, like what am I really looking for? I'm looking for a good Destiny. And I'm looking into Hyperspeed 3 isn't amazing. If you need to move
Locked out in
around
certain,
from
certain hidden base decks. I mean, certain hidden base decks
could
won't
be
deploy, nicely so you can hyperspeed. So that's true. This one has higher potential to
right.
get locked out than the TIE Scout does.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hyperspeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you might
True.
need to go from like to Endor to Yavin even, and Vader's personal shuttle can't do that.
Yeah, you're right. Hoth is 5, and yeah, Yavin's 4. Correct. Yeah, if that were the
But I
situation
know
for,
I
yeah,
yeah, I like Vader's personal shuttle in some decks, but yeah, I'm not really trying to stomp people out in space. Yeah, I would say, yeah, TIE Scout really that's just there to show my respect to hidden base. And I don't think you can respect yeah, you can respect hidden base too much, of course, but um you got to show it a lot of respect if you're paying hunt down duel. Like I said, like you get your plus points against M&T or TRM. I love playing TRM with this. It's not an easy match. TRM's really really powerful and they could be hitting me with AFAs. But I have 2 Maras. I can come at them. I love playing TRM with this. They're gonna maybe draw zeros even. That's a great matchup for this deck. And I'll play it anytime. I love that matchup. But yeah, that's really that's just my respect for just the meta that you face in tournaments. And yeah, it's Destiny 4. You can throw that back in with Janice. I don't really like this is another good strategy point. We keep coming to them, but I don't really like to throw a 3 or lower back in with Janice.
true.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so a 4 you can get away with that. That's not bad with a 4.
makes sense. Makes sense. Um, okay, yeah, I guess the only other discussion would be, alternatives to propaganda. I mean, I think there was like, switch off. I think this is what Andy uses this in his deck.
Oh,
I
switch
guess,
off.
yeah, but for you, I guess it really only save your 4 LOM. You don't have IG.
Well,
IG88
why?
is the
So why?
ref.
Yeah, yeah. So what? But why use O switch off if I'm playing just? I don't have Guri, you know.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but just yeah, why use that? You know, you know what I'd rather. I mean, like I don't need to. Forlom is not that important.
yeah.
You know, I
True.
mean, he's great, but like you know, again, that's sort of that scenario where they're being really sluggish
Yeah,
with their Jedi's, and they're just hanging out at a battleground, thinking they can outdrain Hunt down, which is not easy to do. But yeah, then you could come down with EPP Vader and Forlom and cancel Luke's game text. But then why do I even need O switch off at that point? So it's a cool card, obviously. But yeah, for me, if I'm playing X1 droid, I don't like the ratio. Like maybe if I did 2 Forloms or something and I was slugging it out, or like Guri, it's cool with Guri. But you know what I would rather do if I really wanted to kind of make a move in that tempo is I would go with it's worse
yeah,
because
yes.
that you know that's yeah Torch did his
Oh, oh,
did it could be worse against me when I killed one of his characters with a duel. And yeah, no, that's cool, right? It can really cut that force loss down big. And yeah, and there's a certain point mid game an HBX deck might even use some it's worse,
oh,
right, to
yeah.
try to
It
like
could be
win
worse.
the race.
Absolutely. Yeah, it could be
And
worse.
yeah, it
And
could be worse. Yeah,
yeah,
so but I would probably over yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would if I really wanted to go kind of like really nasty against someone, I would go that. But yeah, I mean, for me, the big thing I mean, and it's like, right, and I kind of outlined all the things. You know what I'd be more worried about than losing Forlom is playing against numbers or order to engage or having a big Luke with a saber that maybe I can't quite get, you know, quite his reach is too big, you know, with his saber. I would be more worried about those scenarios. And then so you take a Destiny 5, you know, that's fine. And like again, yeah, and if I'm dying to get an extra 6 in here, probably an extra Vader's Obsession. Yeah, I mean it's questionable if I really in this format would you I think you're great with 2 and 2 in this, but yeah, yeah, it's worth thinking about.
yeah. And I was thinking about, put all sections alert, like the straight up way to
Yep.
cancel game text,
I see that. I see that. So, but for me, that's really if they come at Vader when he's on the Death Star, right? Like, why else? Like, I already like I'm gonna pounce down on someone and then hit them with that. They're on the like so they're over on the Death Star doing what, right? I'm probably gonna just want to duel them. No, I mean that's an interesting option. But it just seems too conditional to me. That's all.
and that was true.
Like
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I definitely have seen that. Someone has Vader on Death Star 1 docking bay and they want to just keep him safe from someone coming down at him. You can do that, but I already use 4 Vaders. You know, you could just lose a Vader if you're Veti Vader too, if you want to really not lose him. But yeah, no, I think there are again, I think this is the thing with the 6 Destiny cards. I honestly, this is a great point because when I see Dual Huntdown, I see people just kind of going with some big 6 Destiny cards. And my question is like, one, right? Why not use propaganda to protect yourself against a deck that's going to be deadly to play against, like EBO or just Kessel? Period. Um, why not? Or even just they go really old school. They do Revolution on Obi's Hut or something. You know, why not? Why not just? I would add a 4th prop practically if I don't know. That's really touchy with the Grimtosh, but yeah, I mean, this is my thing about adding big 6s for Hunt Down is you're probably going to want to play some Destiny 5 cards that help you against the meta if you care about showing up against a deck that you don't know what you're going to face, right? And this point, like if you want to be a Hunt Down player who can and this obviously is not this is a totally different topic than using like switch off or whatever, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean I can do things to really screw people or something. But yeah, for the most part, I think, or like Furry Fury or whatever, like God, why would I worry about Han and Chewie with this deck? You know, like so they've got Han and Chewie. I mean, I just probably run away from Han and Chewie if I really don't have an answer for them, you know? Or I'd rather, like I said, I'd probably rather use something
Yeah.
that's actually going to save me from the just the whatever the meta. I keep saying that, but deck strategies that are not mains and toys based or something. Or that I would never. I just can't. Yeah, why? Why would I need to beat up on Han and Leia?
Because there's so many Super Falcon builds, right? And there's a lot of Super Falcons. They'll do
Yeah,
I know, and they'll do
yeah, yeah. That's
and they'll
true.
blow you out. I mean that's the issue. Of
That's
course,
true.
yeah, yeah.
That's true, but that's more. See, here's the thing though. If I'm facing it's like Super Falcon, I'm not worried about Super Falcon with this deck. What are they going to do with Super Falcon? Be it Kessel, right? I've already got props, and I'm
Well,
just going to have to.
yeah.
Really, I'm going to have to outdrain them if let's say they're making moves with Super Falcon at Kifix or something. Even if they play that, I use Kifix in my TRM nudge personally, just because I kind of like the activation. Um, but anyway, and I like to maybe try to skimp a little bit on the Twixes, but yeah, I'm not really scrapping it out. I mean, if it was a non-dual hunt down, you could do that, sure, because you might have to. I mean, that's worth thinking about. But yeah, but then I'm more of a fan of just pretty much any sixes. Just go with. There's going to be a Destiny 5 card that's better against the meta, except for it's worse. Some people, you could even play an extra Emperor Palpatine if you really want more sixes. But yeah, I am really, really not a fan of the just sort of these like random big Destiny 6 cards. They don't have a fast used way. I mean, Masterful Move, whole different story, right? I'm using Masterful Move to get, like we talked about, to get Holonet to help me get Vader if I'm not drawing him, or it's an easy recycle. But yeah, I would really recommend to hunt down players who are just really, they like the idea of a cool Destiny 6 card. I would say look at, make sure you've got your order to engage, make sure you have all of your effects that help you fight force retrieval, make sure you have an answer for EBO, and a real answer for EBO. Let's be honest, right? Like that's some real space firepower they're coming with. And you may not be able, if you're playing duel, it's probably going to be tough for you to win a space battle against EBO. But yeah, to really look at sort of the technical Destiny 5 cards. Is a good piece of advice I would give to hunt down players. So that would be, the ones we talked about of disarmed, order to engage, you cannot hide forever. Um, yeah, I'm not limited resources. I mean, that's an interesting one too. The thing with limited resources, I almost would want to be like, I would want to use that defensive fire or whatever, that Destiny 2 card.
Destiny, well, it's
Um,
3 in PDS2, right? So, but yes.
yeah, no, defensive fire. Oh, is it? Okay, right, because it's not the split. No, I got
Correct.
you.
Not, yeah, the non-split's a 3, but yeah, it's not great, but it's better than a 2. That's all I'll
Good
say.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of my thought is that like you really don't go for the Destiny 6 cards because like it's not that type of deck. You're not trying to just scrap it out with mains. Like you want to move away right into just not for nothing, but if you're flipped, they can't even force drain with Leia.
Correct.
So
And
like really screws Leia big time. I'm not that worried about Leia.
true.
Um,
True.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. It's an interesting deck hunt down. It really touches. And again, right, Tentacle for that matter, too. Tentacle's nice. If you're against Prophet, you've got to worry about Fallen Portal, um, Barrier, whatever, right? It's worse. Could be worse. Yeah, but no, Hunt Down's interesting. I think Hunt Down Duel is cool if people really want to like try to step up against M&T, but it's not. I do not think it's actually beginner friendly. Aside from the fact that it's like a scrubby, cheesy objective, but that's kind of not saying much when it comes to DS2. People get blown out in DS2. It's a very, in my opinion, it's just a very cheesy format compared to Reflections 2, minus obs and watch your step. We already covered that. I'm not going to repeat myself about that. But yeah, hey, don't get me wrong. DS2 is great, really fun, awesome retro format. Glad we're having this tournament. Amazing, right? And I love retro SWCCG. But yeah, yeah, it's cool. You really want to step up against the meta with this deck. You want to step up against M&T. You're willing to take on a tougher battle against space. You have to really understand how to face HBX or EBO, and that took me some time to do it. So it's not, yeah, I definitely think if you're kind of trying to, get a handle on the competitive environment, that Brigham is absolutely the way to go. And if you want a more solid option, just go with non-dual, because non-dual, you don't have to worry about your deck design as much, and you can play space and have more answers for people. But yeah, that's always my thing, is that, like, yeah, I just kind of wish I saw more dual hunt downs, just because, like, it's just, yeah, it's cool that you're willing to wager something, playing a deck this abusive.
I agree, and that's one thing I liked about your gameplay is that it requires skill. I mean, that's kind of what you watch the Bragness videos. It requires skill to
Yeah,
track your
yeah,
destiny, and even though you said you're not
yeah.
the best tracker in the world, it still requires skill to know what cards to lose, and a lot of
Oh
people just
yeah, no,
do the easy route. You know.
yeah, no, it's not easy to play, really. Yeah, again, this is a point, I can't say this enough. Like, Huntdown's really, really good, and you can win just by getting lucky, right? But that's not gonna get you that far, because you're not gonna get lucky all the time. And the times when you're not lucky, then you really have to explore. Yeah, just play the deck, like, if you lose Vader, just try to keep playing, try to get the hang of how much you can do with Mara. Those are, that's just, you got to be able to play late game with Hunt Down, and, like, that's hard, and it's not really that fun, and it takes a lot of endurance. But, like, if you lose Vader, you're immediately in late game, and that's not a bad thing to have to practice. But yeah, no, we covered a lot. We covered Reflections 2 versus DS2, and Watcher Step, and CNV, and yeah,
Yeah.
seems like we got it all. Any other comments or questions, thoughts?
I think you covered most of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think that's a good
I think so.
conversation, and no, I appreciate you, Mandarin, for having it, and I look forward to sharing this with everyone else. And thank you so much.
Awesome. My pleasure. All right. You take care, Bill.
You too. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.